Yimo, the most powerful cultivator of the Loyu continent, stood alone against the entire army of the Demon King. With overwhelming strength and determination, he managed to repel the invading forces and save the whole continent. In its darkest hour, his eyes were red from exhaustion, his body battered, yet his heart felt a brief moment of relief as he believed the nightmare was finally over. But just as he exhaled, a masked woman suddenly appeared beside his trusted companions. Her voice was cold and emotionless, as she declared that it was time to execute the next plan. Before Yimo could react, a sharp sound tore through the air. A sudden, merciless attack struck him from behind. Shockingly, the ones who attacked him were none other than the comrades he had always trusted with his life. Betrayed and gravely wounded, Yimo collapsed into a pool of blood. Pain, disbelief, and fury filled his eyes as he struggled to breathe. Gritting his teeth, he demanded to know why they had betrayed him after everything he had done. Raising his head with burning rage, he swore that one day he would drag every single traitor into hell with his own hands. As his consciousness began to fade, an unfamiliar voice echoed in his mind. And suddenly, everything went dark. The next moment, Yimo awoke to the cheerful voice of someone shouting that the student has finally woken up. Confused, he opened his eyes and saw a beautiful woman looking at him with concern, asking how he was feeling. Completely stunned, Yimo wondered whether he was truly dead or still alive. He glanced around at a crowd of unfamiliar people surrounding him, feeling utterly lost. Who were these people? Where was he? Could this be the legendary underworld? Just then, a sharp-faced young man sneered mockingly, saying that the so-called young master of the Y family was so weak that he fainted during a simple exam. Another person laughed and added that Yimo was no longer even a young master, since he had already been expelled from his family. A blonde girl beside them giggled and urged her brother, Lin, to continue the test instead of wasting time on trash like him. Lin lifted his chin arrogantly, treating Yimo with pure disdain. The teacher clapped her hands and ordered everyone to proceed with the examination. And in that instant, a flood of memories crashed into Yimo's mind. Overwhelmed, he suddenly realized that he was no longer in the Loyu continent. Instead, he had transmigrated into the body of another person, who also happened to be named Yimo. This body once belonged to the former young master of the Y family, but due to blocked meridians, he was considered useless and abandoned by his clan after his parents' death. Though shocked, Yimo gradually accepted that he had been reborn in another world. According to the body's memories, people here did not understand cultivation at all. However, there existed a mysterious energy in the environment known as spiritual energy, which ordinary people could neither sense nor use. But in Loyu continent, cultivators had long mastered the art of absorbing it, and to Yemo's surprise, he could still faintly feel that energy around him. Calmly, he began circulating his cultivation method, guiding spiritual energy into his body. In just moments, his blocked meridians were completely unsealed. Even more astonishingly, his height seemed to increase slightly. Clenching his fists, Yimo resolved that if he could return to the 11th cultivation level, he might be able to tear through space and return to Loyu continent. With burning hatred in his heart, he vowed to take revenge on every single traitor. Accepting that his power had dropped to only the first level, he prepared to rebuild himself from scratch. Turning toward the stadium, Yimo decided to test his newly awakened body. When an instructor saw him walking onto the track, he asked in surprise whether Yimo had already recovered. Calmly, Yimo replied that today was the 100-meter sprint test and that he also wished to participate. Immediately, nearby students burst into laughter. They mocked him, saying that Lin Bei, the school record holder who had already been accepted into a top sports academy, was up next. Lin and his girlfriend sneered at Yimo, calling him worthless. Ignoring them, Yimo simply smiled, knowing that even at the first stage of cultivation, his physical abilities far surpassed any normal human. Reluctantly, the coach agreed to let him run, saying that since no one else wanted to race Lin Bei, it would just be the two of them. They both took their positions at the starting line. The referee raised the gun and shouted, "Ready." The atmosphere grew tense. Lin tightened his muscles, full of confidence. The gun fired, and Lin shot forward like an arrow. But Yimo remained completely still. As the crowd laughed, Yimo silently counted 1, 2. His eyes glowed mysteriously as he thought that giving Lin a 3-second head start was more than enough. Then boom! Yimo exploded forward with terrifying speed, moving like a legendary ancient cultivator. The spectators froze in disbelief, jaws dropping. Even the teacher was shaken to her core, unable to comprehend what she was witnessing. With inhuman speed and strength, Yimo easily overtook Lin Bei, who was already struggling to breathe. Yimo crossed the finish line effortlessly, then casually began counting the seconds until Lin arrived. 1, 2, 3. The entire stadium was in stunned silence. The gap between them was like that between heaven and earth. Yimo turned and calmly told Lin that he had given him a full 6-second advantage. Stammering, the teacher announced that Yimo had set a new school record, 9.58 seconds. Lin Bei collapsed in despair, muttering that this was impossible. Meanwhile, Yimo coldly evaluated his body, acknowledging that while its talent was decent, it was still far below his past self. Yet he declared confidently that this was only the beginning and that he would one day reclaim his rightful place at the peak of power. Memories of his former life resurfaced, how he had cultivated for only 50 years to surpass countless experts. How at 65 he broke through the 11th level and became the strongest cultivator on the continent, and how, after defeating the Demon King, he was repaid with betrayal instead of gratitude. Returning to the present, Imo entered the bathroom to clear his mind. Looking at his reflection, he realized that to quickly regain his power, he would need rare spiritual herbs, but their price was far beyond what he could afford. Checking his wallet, he was shocked to find only 50 yuan, barely enough to buy even low-grade talisman materials. Gritting his teeth, he resolved that if he wanted revenge, he must first find a way to earn money, buy spiritual herbs, and grow stronger as fast as possible. At that moment, Lin walked into the bathroom, saw Imo, and sneered mockingly, saying he had been searching for him everywhere. The original owner of this body had often been extorted by this group. Their leader, Wang Bio, the president of the boxing club, said with resentment that today Imo had humiliated him, so the monthly protection fee must be paid immediately. Together with his subordinates Fang Peng and Li Liang, they had been collecting money from Imo every month under the excuse of protection, even though they had already taken a large sum just last week. Lin Bei whispered to Wang Bio that Imo seemed different today, but Wang Bio dismissed his concern with disdain, saying that a useless person was not worth worrying about. Bio then threw a punch arrogantly, boasting that when he won the boxing championship, Imo was still drinking his mother's milk. But Imo calmly thought that the old Imo might have endured this, but he was no longer that weak boy. He easily sidestepped the punch and mocked Bo's slow speed. In an instant, Imo reached out and grabbed Wang Bio by the throat with terrifying strength, then casually threw him aside as if he were nothing. In the eyes of a cultivator, ordinary people were no different from infants. Without giving anyone time to react, Imo turned and delivered a lightning-fast kick toward Li Liang, sending him crashing violently into the wall. Lin Bei and Fang Peng stood frozen in terror. Lin Bei stammered, asking if this was really Imo. Imo stepped forward coldly, releasing an overwhelming killing intent, and asked whether they were afraid. Cornered, Lin Bei shouted for everyone to attack together and not underestimate him. But it was useless. Imo calmly raised both hands and effortlessly blocked their punches. Gripping their fists, he stood like an unmovable mountain, then applied a little pressure, forcing both of them to their knees in pain. They screamed and begged him to let go. Imo smiled darkly and said there was no rush. They could take their time. Overwhelmed by agony, they sobbed apologies, pleading for mercy. Indifferently, Imo released them and tossed them aside like trash. Trembling, Lin Bei crawled on the floor and cried, "Brother, why? No. Young master, why? Please spare my life." Seeing his men defeated, Hangbo's face twisted with rage. Grinding his teeth, he roared that he would never let Imo walk away like this and charged at him furiously. But Imo was faster. He pivoted and delivered a devastating punch straight to Hangbo's face, sending him flying backward and slamming into a bathroom stall door. Defeated by a single blow, he lay there motionless, standing over his fallen enemies. Imo coldly warned that next time he would not be so merciful. Lin Bei looked up in pure terror and whispered that Imo was not human. He was a monster. The remaining thugs backed away in panic, begging him not to come closer and admitting they were wrong. With icy eyes, Imo ordered them to return everything they had taken from him. Confused and frightened, they asked what he meant. His eyes glowed faintly as he clarified that he wanted back everything they had extorted. Lin Bei panicked, immediately scrambling to hand over a thick bundle of cash, trembling as he said that this was all of it. As Imo left, he reflected that perhaps he had gone a bit too far, but he knew these people would never dare to speak against him again. While the others rushed to carry Bio to the infirmary, Imo decided he could no longer stay at school. There were too many people watching. He needed to find a place to live outside. Fortunately, he now had his first real capital, though not much. It was enough to buy low-level talisman materials and begin the first step of his revenge plan. Talisman making was one of the most basic techniques used by low-level immortal cultivators. By infusing spiritual energy into special materials, magical effects could be created, and even at his current stage, Imo could craft them easily. Focusing his energy, he summoned 5 talismans of different attributes. Looking at them with satisfaction, he smiled and collected them one by one, confident that selling them would bring him a good sum of money. With that secured, his next goal was to find a proper place to cultivate and purchase medicinal ingredients. 3 weeks passed. Despite being at the first stage of immortal cultivation, Imo still had no success selling his talismans. People in this world viewed such objects as mere superstition and refused to believe in their power. Frustrated, he wandered the streets aimlessly until suddenly he heard a pitiful whimper. Looking down, he saw a small injured puppy staggering beside him before collapsing. It was clearly dying, likely hit by a car. Kneeling beside it, Imo studied the creature silently, then decided to test his healing talisman. Placing it on the puppy, a gentle green light surrounded the animal, restoring its organs and healing its body completely. Moments later, the puppy opened its eyes, full of life, and began jumping and barking happily. Yimo smiled and petted it as it wagged its tail gratefully. Suddenly, the dog growled defensively at someone approaching. A man's voice scoffed, asking why anyone would care about a stray mutt. A wealthy couple appeared, Su Jingwen and Wang Peng. Su Jingwen scolded her partner for hitting the dog with his car, while Wang Peng arrogantly replied that he never asked her to follow him and insisted they take the dog to a hospital. While they argued, Su Jingwen suddenly froze in shock. She saw Yimo holding the same puppy, now completely healed. Stunned, she wondered how this was possible when moments ago it had been bleeding and near death. They rushed over. Wang Peng angrily demanded to know where Yimo came from, while Su Jingwen asked in disbelief how the dog had been cured. Yimo noticed the hospital bag she carried and deduced that she must be desperately seeking treatment for a sick relative. Sensing an opportunity, he stood up and revealed that he had used this to heal the dog. Showing her a blue talisman, she asked if it was a protection talisman. Wang Peng immediately accused Yimo of being a fraud and warned her not to trust him, claiming the whole situation could be a trick. Ignoring him, Su Jingwen asked, hopefully whether the talisman could save someone in a vegetative state. Yimo understood that she was referring to a family member. Realizing that such a condition involved damage to the spirit, he explained that his clear spirit talisman was perfectly suited for this. Calmly, he handed her one and said she only needed to throw it toward the patient. Then he stated the price. Large talismans cost 20,000, small ones 10,000. Without hesitation, Su Jingwen offered 50,000 and asked to buy all of them, leaving Wang Peng completely shocked. Wang Peng was horrified, thinking that Su Jingwen had completely lost her mind. Furious, he tried to shove Yimo aside while shouting at him to get lost and calling him a liar. But Yimo casually caught his hand with astonishing ease, causing Wang Peng to cry out in pain. His wrist was completely immobilized as Yimo spoke coldly, saying that he was simply conducting his business while she was trying to save her loved one. His eyes glowed intensely red as he warned in a threatening voice that the one who should leave was Wang Peng, not him. With a single effortless push, Yimo sent Wang Peng stumbling back onto the ground. While Wang Peng lay stunned, Yimo calmly completed the deal with Su Jingwen, handing her the talismans along with a small piece of paper containing his contact information. In exchange for her bank card, he explained that among the remaining talismans, the yellow one was for protection and the red one was a fireball talisman. With an enigmatic smile, he sincerely told her that he hoped she would never need to use those too. Deeply moved, Su Jingwen thanked him with a trembling voice. Just as Yimo turned to leave, she suddenly realized that she still did not know his name and called out to ask him. Without stopping, Yimo waved his hand and simply replied, "My name is Yimo," before walking away with the puppy faithfully following behind him. Wang Peng rose to his feet, still insisting that Yimo looked like nothing but a fraud. But Su Jingwen ignored him completely, her gaze fixed on Yimo's retreating figure, holding the talismans tightly. She admitted to herself that she understood how absurd this all sounded, and that the chances of such a thing working were incredibly slim. Yet, since the person lying in that hospital bed was her own mother, she chose to cling to even the smallest hope, wondering what would happen if the talisman truly worked. Meanwhile, Yimo walked down the street with the puppy, thinking that now he finally had money and could look for a place to stay. His next goal was to find medicinal ingredients to aid his cultivation. Suddenly, the little dog stopped and began barking toward a certain direction, catching Yimo's attention. Curious, he followed its gaze and found himself standing in front of a house from which a dense aura of spiritual energy was emanating. His eyes widened in shock. He had never expected to find such pure spiritual energy in this world. Focusing his perception, he discovered that in the courtyard grew a legendary plant, the silver heart grass. Elsewhere in the hospital, a nurse disinfected Wang Peng's injured hand while he complained bitterly about the pain, angrily insisting that Yimo was definitely not a good person. He muttered that he hoped he would never run into that guy again. At that moment, an elderly man appeared and reproached someone, saying that Wang Peng had come out of kindness to accompany Su Jingwen to see her mother. This man, Su Jianzhong, a city council member of Nainai, sternly scolded his daughter, asking how she could embarrass Wang Peng like this and damage their family's reputation. He continued lecturing her for believing in a charlatan, saying that people were already laughing at her. Two nurses nearby whispered and giggled that the councilman's daughter had foolishly spent tens of thousands on a talisman. Despite the humiliation, Su Jingwen lowered her head with a mixture of sadness and determination. Clutching the talisman tightly, she whispered that she wanted to try just one more time, even if it was her last chance. She wanted to be able to say she had done everything she could. Her father exploded in rage, shouting that she had lost her mind and sarcastically asking whether her next step would be to perform a spirit dance. Finally, Su Jingwen turned and confronted him, asking what he himself had done for her mother. She accused him of rarely visiting her comatose mother and said that if they had transferred her earlier to a better hospital, she might have recovered sooner. With tears in her eyes, she demanded to know whether he had truly done his best. Her father stood speechless, deeply shaken. Crying, she accused him of only wanting to sign papers so he could be free and happy with his lover. Enraged, Su Jianzhong raised his hand to slap her, but at the last second, he stopped himself, his face twisted with anger. Slowly lowering his hand, he sighed bitterly, saying that the older he got, the less control he had over her. Turning away in frustration, he declared coldly that he would call a nurse to forcibly remove the life support tubes. Horrified, Su Jingwen held up the talisman and screamed that she would not allow it. She ran to her mother's bedside, sobbing and swearing that no matter what happened, she would never give up. At that moment, the talisman in her hand suddenly burst into a brilliant blue light. Spiritual energy surrounded her, and through the glow, she heard a faint voice calling her name. Shocked, Su Jingwen froze. Su Jianzhong spun around in disbelief when he heard a voice coming from the hospital bed. On the bed, Su Rong, Su Jingwen's mother, slowly opened her eyes and weakly told her daughter that she had lost weight. Trembling, Su Jingwen whispered Mom, as her father rushed out into the hallway, desperately shouting for a nurse. Filled with overwhelming joy, he ran through the hospital calling for help, yelling that his wife had woken up. Doctors and nurses rushed in disbelief. After a full examination, the doctor informed Su Jianzhong that although Su Rong had awakened after many years, she would still need at least a year before she could stand or walk again. Meanwhile, Su Jingwen stared at the glowing fragments of the talisman dissolving into blue light. Realizing with certainty that this miracle had come from Yemo's talisman, she gasped in awe, whispering, "It really worked." The medical staff and Su Jianzhong were stunned, calling it an incredible miracle. One doctor suggested immediately contacting Professor Lin, a Nobel laureate, but Su Jianzhong suddenly realized that science was not responsible. It was the talisman. Nearby, Wang Peng trembled in fear, wondering in panic whether Yemo might truly be an immortal being. Su Jingwen hugged her mother tightly as Su Rong softly told her that she had suffered too much. With renewed determination, Su Jingwen believed that gods truly existed in this world and swore that if she ever saw Yemo again, she would give anything to repay him. Back at the mysterious house, Yemo smiled in satisfaction, declaring that this would be his new home. The puppy rolled happily on the bed beside him. He knew that this place would be the first step in his return to the Luyu continent. Memories of his betrayers, shadowy figures wrapped in red aura, flashed through his mind. With cold, vengeful eyes, Yemo silently vowed that he would not let a single one of them escape. To return, he had to reach the 11th cultivation stage again, which meant finding spiritual sources and precious materials. Glaring into the distance, he promised that the day of his return from hell was not far away. Lying on the bed, Yemo realized something troubling. Spiritual energy in this world was slowly disappearing. If this continued, he would eventually be unable to cultivate it all. The only solution was to find places or objects that contained spiritual energy, such as spiritual springs or spiritual materials. Fortunately, he already had the silver heart grass growing in his courtyard. This legendary plant could be refined into pills that help immortal cultivators advance. His plan was simple: wait for it to mature, harvest its seeds, and refine a spirit-gathering pill to reach the second cultivation stage. However, he knew that refining pills was too conspicuous and could attract unwanted attention. Yemo knew that drawing unnecessary attention would only create trouble and slow his progress. Aware that an accident could happen at any moment, he decided that he needed to begin cultivating immediately. To gather the remaining ingredients, he went out onto the streets and observed a roaming market, searching for an opportunity. However, he soon realized that the auxiliary materials needed for pill making were far too expensive, and he still did not have enough money. Frustrated, he concluded that setting up a street stall was not a viable solution. As he continued selling his talismans, Yemo sighed inwardly, thinking that although he had tried to keep a low profile, problems had still found him. His eyes narrowed as he noticed that those people were there again. Coldly, he observed that they had been remarkably patient, always keeping their distance. He remembered that they first appeared on the third day he set up his stall, clearly an organized and premeditated move. Now, seeing that they had gathered more people, he wondered if today would finally be the day they acted. With a determined expression, he began packing up his belongings, thinking that if they truly intended to move against him, he would finally see who was so interested in him. Suddenly, a female voice called out his name, Yemo. He turned around to see a girl staring at him in surprise. She asked what he was doing setting up a stall there, saying she hadn't seen him at school in several days. Yemo looked at her with curiosity, trying to remember who she was. In a compassionate tone, she continued, saying she knew his body was weak and that he had been abandoned by the Y family, but she never expected that he wouldn't even be able to afford his studies anymore. At that moment, Yemo finally recognized her. She was a classmate, one of the few people who had once defended the original owner of his body. The girl began rummaging through her bag, saying she would lend him some money because he at least still needed to attend school. However, Yemo coldly interrupted her, apologizing and saying he had something urgent to do and that they could talk another time. He then walked away, leaving her completely stunned and offended. Watching his strange departure, the girl grew worried, sensing that something was wrong and wondering if he had gotten himself into serious trouble. Meanwhile, Yumo entered a lonely alley. Calmly using his aura perception, he detected his pursuers, 7 on the left and 3 on the right. A chilling look crossed his face as he decided to deal with all of them at once. Pretending to flee, he suddenly picked up speed and ran through the narrow passage. His pursuers, armed with knives, fell right into his trap, shouting that he was trying to escape and urging each other to chase him. They followed closely across rooftops and through the industrial alleyways. Finally, Yumo stopped in a dead-end alley with his back turned to them, waiting for them to close in. One of the thugs sneered arrogantly, saying he had nowhere left to run as they surrounded him. Slowly, Yumo turned around with an icy calm and ordered the rest of them to come out of hiding. One by one, all the men emerged, surrounding him with bats and knives in hand. Their bald leader, whose eyes glowed faintly pink, mockingly admitted that Yumo had some skill, wrapped in a purple aura. Yumo asked coldly why they had been watching him for so many days and who had sent them. The leader sneered, saying that after offending such a powerful family, Yumo still had the audacity to act normally and sell his medicines, claiming that he deserved a short life. Another thug added that he couldn't understand how the daughter of the Nin family could like someone like Yumo, warning him that he would have to wait until his next life to enjoy such fortune. Hearing this, Yumo recalled his past memory. He and Nin Kingzu had once been engaged, but considering his weakness and expulsion from the Y family, the engagement should have been broken, so it made no sense that the Nin family would want him dead over this alone. Determined, he concluded that someone else must be behind everything, and he would make them talk. From a distance, his classmate watched the scene in horror, realizing that these men truly intended to kill Yumo. She panicked, remembering that Yumo was supposed to be weak and unable to even defeat an ordinary person, while these men were armed with weapons. Desperate, she pulled out her phone to call the police, but before she could dial, one of the thugs spotted her, mockingly calling her a little wildcat. Suddenly, a huge, scarred man grabbed her phone and asked menacingly if she was trying to call for help. She screamed for him to let her go, drawing Yumo's attention. The thugs immediately became tense, shouting in shock that their boss had arrived. The massive man seized her by the hair, easily overpowering her. Yumo recognized her instantly as Huang Ying and wondered anxiously why she was in such a dangerous place. The boss laughed at Yumo, saying he was lucky with women. Not only had a noble family beauty, but now another girl was following him too. Despite her fear, Wang Jing shouted at Yumo to run, warning him that the men had knives. Through tears, she tried to intimidate them by saying she belonged to the Wang family of the capital, but the men only laughed at her claim. The boss leaned in, close, and whispered that nobody would know if they killed her right there. Paralyzed with terror, she could barely speak as a knife pressed against her neck. With a cruel smile, the thug told her to be more careful in her next life as he prepared to strike. Before he could act, Yumo suddenly leapt forward, stopping the attack with a swift kick surrounded by purple aura. He caught the blade barehanded and deflected it with incredible force. Even knowing this display would attract unwanted attention, Yumo grabbed the boss's face with crushing strength. In one powerful motion, he slammed the man's head into a nearby mirror, shattering it instantly. Wang Jing stared in disbelief, wondering if this was truly the same Yumo she knew. The remaining thugs trembled in fear at his overwhelming power. With a freezing gaze, Yumo demanded to know who had sent them. Elsewhere in the city, police received a radio report that Brother Yang, also known as Scar, and his gang had mobilized. An officer urgently asked for their location and was told they were in the rear district of East Street, where around 30 men were confronting a young man and had taken a woman hostage. Shocked, the officer sped toward the scene and called for backup, warning his team not to act recklessly because these were violent drug traffickers. Moments later, another trembling voice came over the radio saying that reinforcements might no longer be necessary. When officers arrived, they stared in disbelief at the alley filled with unconscious thugs. A shaken officer reported that a single young man had defeated them all. Yumo then grabbed Scar by the hair and lifted him effortlessly off the ground. Beaten and terrified, Scar wondered if this was really the so-called trash of the family, regretting accepting this job. With glowing purple eyes, Yumo demanded to know where Scar got his information and whether it came from the Nin family or the Y family. He coldly warned that Scar had only 3 seconds to speak. Panicking, Scar desperately tried to answer, but Scar could only stammer for Yumo to wait. At that very moment, an authoritative shout ordered Yumo to stop, interrupting the interrogation. The police captain and his partner rushed into the scene, and the captain yelled at Yumo not to continue, warning that the nature of the situation would change. Yumo glanced at them sideways, questioning the perfectly timed arrival of the inspectors and wondering whether this was truly a coincidence. Still holding Scar, he considered whether he should force the situation anyway. In the end, he reasoned that these people already knew his strength. With a quiet sigh, he said he understood and released Scar, letting him collapse onto the ground. Scar let out a relieved breath, feeling as though he had been saved, while Yumo admitted to himself that his current power was still insufficient to oppose state institutions. The police captain also sighed in relief, glad he had arrived in time, as he could not even imagine what Yemo might have done otherwise. Looking at Yemo's back, he found it astonishing that a single young man had defeated so many dangerous drug traffickers. Approaching him calmly, he introduced himself in a friendly tone as Jan Chunzu of the Nine City Inspection Bureau. Hangin appeared behind Yemo, smiling and greeting him. Jan Chunzu assured Yemo that he had nothing to worry about, as his partner Len had witnessed everything. Len also stepped forward to introduce himself. Yemo narrowed his eyes, realizing that everything had been observed and concluding that, as expected, the government surveillance network was everywhere. Jan Chunzu instructed his partner Loan to take Yemo's statement later, promising that they would not ask anything irrelevant. Suddenly, a loud voice echoed through the alley, announcing that Officer Huang was present and interrupting the procedure. A man with a goatee and an arrogant smile emerged, sneering that if he had not arrived, they would have let the suspect escape. The newcomer, identified as second-level Inspector Captain Wei, turned toward Jan Chunzu and declared that Yemo was under arrest for suspected intentional assault in public disturbance. Smirking maliciously, he waved an arrest warrant in front of Yemo's face, claiming it was official orders. Outraged, Hangjin stepped in, shouting at Wei and demanding to know what he was talking about. Since it was obvious that Yemo had been threatened, Wei glanced at her disdainfully, his eyes glowing faintly blue, and mockingly repeated the word threatened. With a satisfied grin, he claimed that all he saw was Yemo brutally beating a group of ordinary people until their hands and legs were broken. Furious, Jan Chunzu grabbed Wei by the collar, calling him a bastard and demanding to know what nonsense he was speaking, implying that Wei clearly knew who those men were. Calm and terrifying, with his eyes glowing purple, Wei replied that he knew exactly what he was saying. He then mocked Jan Chunzu, asking since when a level 3 inspector had the right to question him, threatening that he could have his uniform stripped away. This only enraged Jan Chunzu further, who exploded in fury. His partner, Loan, quickly stepped in to restrain him, urging him to calm down. Amid the tension, Yemo spoke up calmly, saying that he understood and would go with them. Jan Chunzu stared at him in shock, asking what he was saying. Yemo, however, had a calculating look. He was now certain that whoever was behind all of this had gone to great lengths to target him. Wei smirked, thinking that this criminal was surprisingly cooperative. Meanwhile, Yemo reasoned that this was actually a good opportunity to gather information, since incidents like this were likely to continue. As he was being escorted, Yemo turned to Wei and remarked that, although he did not know why Wei referred to him as a student, if he did not eliminate this hidden threat, he would never be able to cultivate in peace. Hearing the word student, Wei suddenly realized he had slipped up. Panicking internally, Yemo then added that Wei was clearly one of that mysterious person's subordinates. With a provocative smile, he challenged Wei, asking whether he wanted to test him on behalf of his master and daring him to finish him right there. Visibly shaken by being exposed, Wei pretended ignorance, scoffing that he had no idea what Yemo was talking about and ordering his men to take him away. As Wei led Yemo away in handcuffs under Wang Jing's worried gaze, Yemo remained completely composed. However, as he passed Wei, Yemo smiled slightly, holding a small button between his fingers and whispering, "What a pity." Instinctively, Wei touched his shirt and froze in horror when he realized one of his buttons was missing. Wondering when Yemo had taken it. While being handcuffed, Yemo leaned closer and warned him that next time they met, what he would take would not be just a button. Wei glared at him furiously, silently vowing to deal with Yemo later for this humiliation. Soon after, Yemo was led through the dim corridors of a prison. Inside a cell, a massive, muscular man sat cross-legged on the floor in silent meditation. The metallic sound of a guard striking the bars with a baton shattered the silence. A shadowy figure informed the prisoner that the target, Yemo, would arrive shortly, and that orders from above were to kill him. The prisoner slowly opened his eyes, which glowed a deep red, and simply replied, "Understood." As to masked guards escorted Yemo, he sensed that something was wrong. This did not feel like an ordinary prison. His suspicion was confirmed when he heard a guard laughing mockingly. As the door slammed shut behind him, pushed into the darkness of the cell, a faint purple aura began to emanate from his body, showing that he was fully alert. The metallic click of the lock echoed through the room, and Yemo immediately understood that this was a trap set for a private execution. Instead of feeling fear, a barely visible smile appeared on his face. He found the situation intriguing. His gaze fell upon a towering silhouette sitting in the shadows, and he wondered if this man was the mastermind behind everything. The hulking figure, holding a book marked with a cross, broke the silence. He declared that for many years he had followed the principle of not attacking ordinary people, because to him, someone like Yemo was far too weak. His eyes glowed crimson as he spoke with a menacing smile. Cloaked in darkness with blazing red eyes, the man introduced himself as Son and informed Yemo that someone had entrusted him with the task of sending him to his death, politely asking him not to resist. Yemo stared at him seriously, wondering aloud whether this was yet another person acting under orders. Internally, he reflected that since entering the room, he had felt something strange. a faint but sharp sensation in his spiritual perception. Now he understood. This man possessed a trace of energy, weak but real. Despite this realization, Sohn prepared to attack, promising that he would make Yemo's death painless. With blinding speed, he lunged forward, aiming a lethal strike. But Yemo moved like a blur, dodging with supernatural agility. Sohn's attack sliced through empty air, and his face twisted in disbelief when he realized his target had vanished. In an instant, Yemo appeared beside him and punched him in the face, calmly saying, "You were wrong about one thing to me. You are the weak one." With that, he unleashed a devastating counterattack. Yet Sohn managed to grab Yemo's leg at the last second, stopping his momentum. Grinning wildly, he used his incredible strength to hurl Yemo across the cell. Yemo crashed into the wall, but landed steadily on his feet, unharmed. Both men paused, sizing each other up, wrapped in a purple aura, and forcing a grin. Sohn admitted that he had underestimated Yemo, but warned that now he would make him suffer. Yemo, however, stood perfectly calm, surrounded by a violet glow. In a flash, he launched a rapid barrage of attacks, his fists slicing through the air with purple energy. Each blow was precise and powerful, forcing Sohn completely onto the defensive. Yemo dodged a strike and retaliated with a spinning kick that smashed into Sohn's face. The impact was so powerful that Sohn was knocked to the ground, where Yemo rained down relentless punches. Unable to comprehend the overwhelming gap in their strength, Sohn spat out blood in shock. Yemo kicked him mercilessly, sending him crashing against the rocky wall of the cell. Sohn barely managed to stand again, cursing under his breath. Cursing his bad luck, Sohn staggered while Yemo leapt backward, calmly preparing for his next move. With astonishing agility, Yemo unleashed several blades of compressed wind, creating a cutting vortex of energy that tore apart part of the cell. When the dust finally settled, Yemo stood with his back to the destruction, completely unmoved by the chaos he had created. Bruised and furious, Sohn gritted his teeth, hating the situation he was trapped in. Letting out a roar of rage, he charged forward again, shouting that Yemo had no right to look down on him. Yet his punch was stopped mid-air by an invisible force just inches from Yemo's calm, expressionless face. In the next instant, Yemo delivered a brutal blow straight to Sohn's jaw. Blood burst from his mouth as the pain overwhelmed him, and the impact hurled him violently backward into the rocks. Lying among the rubble, utterly defeated, Sohn stared in disbelief and wondered how such power could even exist. Yemo, now wrapped in a crimson aura, prepared to finish him off, his energy radiating a palpable threat. With incredible speed, he launched a fully charged strike aimed directly at Sohn's fallen body. The attack was so fast that Sohn barely had time to react before taking the hit head-on. Grabbing his bloodied face, Yemo demanded once again to know exactly who had sent him. His eyes glowed with a sinister red light as he prepared his second question, now staring at Sohn with piercing purple eyes and asking where the spiritual energy inside his body had come from. Meanwhile, in his office, Wang Li was screaming angrily into his phone, asking what kind of monster he had been told to face this time. On the other end, a disdainful voice replied, asking what nonsense he was talking about and insisting that Yemo was nothing more than trash, expelled from the family. Wang Li retorted in disbelief, asking whether that person really dared to call someone like Yemo trash. The voice simply told him not to worry, claiming that the assassin arranged was from Lushi and promising Wang Li the position of chief inspector of the Baden district once the job was done. With his eyes glowing red, Wang Li clenched his phone tightly and warned Zempiniao that he better keep his promise. Back in the cell, Yemo sat in front of Sohn and commented that at least he still had some backbone. Sohn let out a bitter laugh and admitted that they had truly underestimated him, saying that someone like Yemo was not a person ordinary mortals like them could touch. Those words made Yemo pause. People like us, and he wondered whether other cultivators might exist in this world. Sohn then began to explain his story. He said that years ago in Lushi, he met an old monk. With a single wave of his hand, that monk had been able to cut down an entire tree using only the wind he generated, leaving Sohn completely stunned. The monk later gave him a bottle of what he called divine water. Following the method the monk taught him, Sohn had been drinking diluted divine water for years, gradually strengthening his body and gaining in human strength. Listening carefully, Yemo realized that this divine water was actually spiritual liquid. He immediately suspected that She might contain a spiritual spring, a place he needed to investigate. He knew that such springs only formed in locations with extremely dense spiritual energy, making them invaluable for cultivation. Yemo then asked directly why, if Sohn had already surpassed ordinary humans, he was still taking orders from them. Sohn's answer was tragic. He revealed that his son suffered from ALS, a degenerative and incurable disease, and that hospital expenses were astronomical. Clenching his fist in helplessness, he admitted that the divine water had no effect on the illness, and all he could do was work desperately to keep his son alive. Overcome with emotion, he cried out that he needed money, fast, to search for any possible cure. After hearing this, Yemo looked thoughtful. With surprising calm, he told Sohn that ALS was actually treatable, and that he might be able to save his son. Shocked, Sohn stared at him in disbelief. Yemo explained that spiritual Liquid did nothing for ordinary people and could even be harmful in high concentrations, but certain ritual techniques could amplify its healing properties. As he spoke, he held up a glowing green talisman. Skeptical, Son asked whether a simple talisman could really do anything. Ignoring him, Yimo activated it. Instantly, a wave of green healing energy surged forward and enveloped Son completely. To his amazement, his wounds visibly recovered, and he felt strength returning to his body. Standing above him, Yimo gave him a choice. Reveal the mastermind behind everything, and he would save his son. Or refuse, and die right there. His eyes glowed red with a chilling threat. After a long silence, Son smiled faintly and accepted his fate. Looking at Yimo with newfound respect, he finally revealed that the person who contacted him was named Sen Pinyao, also known as Young Master Sen. In another location, a blonde-haired man hung up his phone in irritation, complaining about Wang Li's incompetence. This man, Sen Pinyao, owner of the Hangzhen Club, turned to a woman beside him and told her to continue. Smiling charmingly yet cruelly, he asked what she wanted to eat or drink. The camera revealed a chained, beaten, and gagged woman who could only whimper in pain. Sen Pinyao scolded her for her bad behavior, ripped the gag from her mouth, and cruelly threatened her. Holding a pair of pliers, he asked mockingly which tooth he should pull out next. When she cried in terror, he tore out one of her teeth without mercy, plunging her into unbearable suffering. A butler then interrupted to report that young Master's son wanted to know whether the situation with Yimo was under control. Wiping blood from his face, Sen Pinyao arrogantly said that the assassin he hired was from Lu Shi, and told the butler to reassure young Master's son that he would personally visit the police station soon. With a manic expression, he swore that no matter what happened, Yimo would end up dead. Back in the cell, Son handed Yimo his cross, saying it was payment for the talisman. Yimo examined it closely and confirmed that it contained concentrated spiritual liquid. He realized that using it to nourish his silver heart grass would allow him to grow seeds quickly, refine spirit gathering pills, and advance to the second stage of immortal cultivation. Smiling, he thanked Son, saying the item was extremely valuable to him. Son warned him, however, that since he had failed to kill Yimo, Sen Pinyao would never let him go. Darkly, he added that for those targeted by Sen, death might actually be the merciful outcome. Yimo calmly replied that as long as Son kept his part of the deal, everything would be fine, and if Sen Pinyao did not come for him, Yimo would come for Sen himself. Soon after, at Nainai University, a bright yellow luxury sports car stopped at the campus entrance. A long, elegant leg stepped out, drawing everyone's attention. A sophisticated and stunning woman emerged, Su Jingwen, adjusting her sunglasses and looking at the documents in her hand. She muttered that if she had not seen the photo herself, she would never have believed that the young man selling. She wonders whether the young man who sells talismans is truly the legendary abandoned son of the family, and whether she will actually be able to find him. Determined, she walks toward the main building, thinking that her uncle, Wan, should be in his office, and that she will first ask him which class Yimo belongs to. At the same time, inside the university president's office, Hang Jing is desperately pleading with her uncle Hang to intervene, but he refuses outright. He says firmly that he cannot get involved and risk being dragged into trouble alongside her. Panicking, Hang Jing argues that the school must do something, reminding him that Yimo was arrested because of her and that she cannot just stand by and do nothing. Her friend, Professor Jumpin, tries to calm her down. Suddenly, the office door burst open, interrupting their heated argument. Seeing the newcomer, Hang Jing asks in surprise whether this is Sister Jingwen. Su Jingwen, with a serious expression, ignores everyone else and asks directly whether they are talking about Yimo. Meanwhile, at the police station, Zhang Chunzu slams his hand on Wanli's desk in anger, demanding that he not go too far. Frustrated, he reminds him that he had been tracking the Scar group for a long time and that just when he finally gathered solid evidence against them, Wanli let them go. Pointing accusingly, Zhang Shunzu openly states that Wanli is abusing his power for personal benefit. With irritating calm, Wanli warns him that he needs proof before speaking and that he cannot afford the consequences of defaming a superior officer. Undeterred, Zhang Shunzu hits the desk again and shouts that he knows exactly what Wanli does behind the scenes. Smiling provocatively, Wanli leans forward and dares him to say it out loud, leaving Zhang Shunzu trembling with rage but unable to respond. Suddenly, the office door opens again, and an officer apologizes, saying this is the captain's office, and that no one is allowed to enter. Hang Jing storms in, followed by Su Jingwen. She points at Wanli and demands that Yimo be released immediately, while the officer apologizes for failing to stop them. Furious, Wanli scolds the officer for being unable to even hold back one person. Inside, he wonders who this woman is and what kind of backing Yimo might have. Concluding that her influence must be extraordinary, calmly lighting a cigarette, he tells them that Yimo is a suspect in theft and serious assault, so he cannot be released. Zhang Shunsu explodes, shouting that this is nonsense and asking when the charge of theft was added. Wanli coldly reminds him that he is the captain, and that internal Documents cannot be disclosed. Hang Jing then angrily intervenes, asking what happened to the real criminals, and accusing Wanli of twisting the law to free the guilty while imprisoning Yimo. Wanli points at her threateningly, warning that he owes her no explanation, and that if she does not leave immediately, he will arrest her for obstructing justice. Unfazed, Su Jingwen places her phone firmly on the desk, then calmly sits on Wanli's own table, and tells him to go ahead and try to arrest her. Enraged, Wanli jumps up and orders officers to come in. Several policemen enter, and he commands them to take Su Jingwen, Hang Jing, and Zhang Chunsu to the detention room, declaring that they are now suspected accomplices of the thief. He also announces that Zhang Chunsu is suspended from duty. Zhang Chunsu screams in fury at this abuse of authority. With calm confidence, Su Jingwen asks whether Director Hang approves of such arbitrary arrest. Wanli laughs loudly and says that slandering a state officer will only add more crimes to her name. She replies with a sharp smile, saying she is merely curious because she has heard that the Scar Group has given many benefits to Inspector 1. His smile fades as he warns her that some words can bring serious trouble. She then directly asks whether she, too, can use money and power to resolve Yemo's situation, blowing out smoke. Wanli coldly says that those with influence naturally have privileges, and that Yemo's fate is already sealed, just like hers could be. With a chilling tone, he explains that he could simply accuse her of assaulting an inspector, claim he resisted fiercely, and declare that they all died here. The words freeze Zhang Chunsu and Hang Jing in fear, yet Su Jingwen remains completely composed. Smiling serenely, she turns on the speaker of her phone and asks, "Did you hear that, Director Hang?" A commanding voice replies clearly from the phone, "Yes, miss." Wanli turns pale as he stammers the director's name in disbelief. Su Jingwen calmly asks whether she still needs to introduce who is speaking. The director then announces that Wanli is suspended pending investigation for organized crime and abuse of power. Completely crushed, Wanli collapses into his chair and asks in a trembling voice who she really is. With undeniable authority, she reveals herself, Su Jingwen of the Su family of Nainai. Panic strikes him as he realizes that Yimo somehow has connections to this powerful family. Amid the chaos, a cell door suddenly opens, and Yimo is released. He examines the cross Song gave him, now glowing faintly, and thinks that the spiritual liquid inside is a bit scarce, enough for only one upgrade. Suddenly, he senses someone approaching. The sound of heels echoing in the corridor confirms it. The cell door opens to reveal a woman in the doorway. Yimo turns seriously, ready for anything, only to see Su Jingwen standing there with Hang Jing beside her. Smiling, she greets him, saying it has been a long time. Elsewhere, in a luxurious mansion, Zhang Benigno smashes a table with a golf club in fury, shouting that everyone around him is useless. He complains bitterly that one of his men was nearly beaten to death and another imprisoned. Grinding his teeth, he knows that if he fails the Sun family's request, his own fate will be grim. A bodyguard asks what his next move is. With cold determination, Simbanquia orders his elite men to attack Yimo and leave him barely alive, so he can personally torture him. His purple eyes flash with rage as he vows to make Yimo suffer. Back at home, Yimo watches television, realizing that his purchases have nearly drained his money. On the table before him lie his materials, the cross with spiritual liquid, an incense burner, and silver heart grass. Focusing his mind, he begins the refinement process. A golden light surrounds the burner, transforming the ingredients into a spirit gathering pill. Holding the shimmering golden pill, he studies it carefully before swallowing it. A surge of power floods his body, far stronger than expected. Thanks to the concentrated spiritual liquid, in a burst of energy, he successfully reaches the second stage of cultivation, a crucial milestone in regaining his former strength. As the residual energy fades, Yimo stands up, feeling new power flowing through him and thinking that it has been a long time since he felt like this. He moves using the cloud shadow step, leaving his dog completely confused. Confidently, he declares that with his current power, even bullets could not hit him. However, he also realizes that the spiritual liquid is now completely exhausted, meaning he needs more spiritual objects to continue advancing. Remembering Son's words, he concludes that Liushi City is the most likely place to find a spiritual spring, but traveling there normally would be too dangerous. Son had mentioned that a snake-head smuggler could help him enter. As Yimo considers this path, the story moves toward a new and dangerous chapter. Checking his bank account, Yimo realizes that he has barely 85 yuan, an amount laughably insufficient compared to the 100,000 yuan toll demanded by the smuggler. At that very moment, a television advertisement catches his attention, a commercial promoting the Cyan Beauty Injection, which boldly claims it can restore youth and stop the passage of time. The screen shows excited crowds of women praising the product, while the announcer declares that it is selling like hotcakes at a promotional price of 1,999 yuan per injection. Watching this, a brilliant idea suddenly forms in Yemo's mind. Holding a small blue box and smiling slightly, He thinks that women in this world are just as obsessed with youth as anywhere else, and that the upcoming banquet might be his perfect opportunity. A flashback takes the story 5 hours earlier, when Yimo was dining with Su Jingwen. During that conversation, he learned that she was the daughter of Counselor Su of Nainai City. Now he finally understands why Hang Jing said she could directly call the chief inspector's office. Everything clicks into place. Smiling, Su Jingwen tells the student Yimo that she has come hoping he will agree to one thing. With his mouth full of food, Yimo casually asks what it is. She asks whether he has heard of the sign building, and he replies that of course he has. It is the headquarters of the largest cosmetics group in Nainai. With pride, she reveals that the building belongs to her and invites him to a banquet on the top floor the next night to celebrate her mother's recovery. The invitation surprises him, but his eyes gleam with opportunity as he begins to understand her intentions. The next evening, Yimo arrives at the towering sign building, ready for the banquet. Stepping into the luxurious ballroom, he reflects that although his current cultivation level does not allow him to refine true spiritual pills, ordinary medicinal pills are no problem at all. In his hand he holds the small blue box, knowing that inside lies a face preservation pill, the perfect bait for his plan. Such a pill, he thinks, is nothing special. Immortal cultivators in the Luyu continent popularized it long ago, and now he can easily recreate it. Surveying the wealthy crowd, he calculates that selling just 3 or 4 pills will give him the 100,000 yuan he needs. To him, the opportunity is standing right in front of him. Nearby, Su Jingwen's uncles, Liu Yan and Su Sven, murmur among themselves that Jingwen is already in her 30s and should start considering the family's interest. Their aunt, Su Yalin, joins in, urging them to hurry things along and pointing to her own elder sister as an example of what happens when a woman gets too old. With a mocking grin, Su Sven adds that his sister was selfish in her youth and is now a bitter old woman who contributes nothing to the family. Turning directly to her, he coldly asks whether she has become a burden, leaving her humiliated and speechless. Unable to stay silent, Su Jingwen steps in angrily, telling her uncle that he has crossed the line. She defends her aunt, arguing that if she had not cared for everyone when they were young, she would look far older today. With a sinister expression, Su Sven claims he is only speaking for her own good, adding that now that Jingwen's mother has awakened, they should pressure Jingwen even harder. The tension becomes so heavy that Jingwen's mother begins to cough weakly, and her daughter rushes to her side in concern. Su Sven continues mercilessly, declaring that a woman who reaches that age without marrying or having a family is no different from a defective product. He even suggests that Jingwen should marry into the W family to avoid bringing trouble to the Su clan. And Su Yalin timidly suggests that perhaps Jingwen should be allowed to have her own ideas. But Su Sven burst into mocking laughter, sneering at the very word ideas. He arrogantly declares that thinking like that at her age is pure selfishness, then sarcastically asks whether she truly believes that opening a cosmetics company can restore her youth. Suddenly, a firm voice interrupts from the crowd. President Su certainly can. All eyes turn in shock as Yimo calmly steps forward, still holding the blue box. He tells Su Sven that calling a successful businesswoman a defective product is ignorant and ridiculous, freezing the atmosphere with his cold gaze. Furious, Su Sven shouts at him, demanding to know who he is and how he got in, immediately calling security to throw him out. But before anyone can move, Su Jingwen steps in front of Yimo and introduces him as the distinguished guest who saved her mother. Seated in her wheelchair, Jingwen's mother thanks him sincerely, saying, "So you were the one who sold my daughter the talisman." Yimo smiles gently and replies, "You're welcome." Annie, still disdainful, Su Sven warns Jingwen not to be fooled by a scammer, insisting that her mother's recovery came from medicine, not ghosts and demons. Undeterred, Yimo addresses the crowd, introducing himself as someone who studies time and value, and to everyone's shock, declaring himself a partner of President Su. Jingwen is completely stunned into silence. An astonished guest scoffs that Yimo is talking nonsense. Yimo then asks the audience whether cosmetics can truly restore youth, and raises the blue box, declaring that the answer lies inside it. A woman in the crowd mocks him, asking whether he is trying to pull a prank. Ignoring her, Yimo approaches, and Su Yalin and politely asks whether she would do him a small favor. Hesitant, she agrees to listen. Smiling persuasively, he asks her to consume what is inside the box. In front of everyone, Yimo opens it, revealing the shimmering face preservation pill. Su Sven immediately shouts that it is absurd and could be poison. Su Yalin looks at it nervously, unsure whether it is safe to eat. However, Su Jingwen confidently declares that Yimo is her partner, and she trusts him completely. Jingwen's mother even suggests that she herself should try it instead, since Yimo saved her life. Guest whispers skeptically, doubting that such a pill could exist. Leaning closer, Yimo softly asks Su Yalin whether she would like to feel young again, like in her prime. His words stir painful memories in her heart, mocking comments about her age, cruel laughter, humiliations, and ridicule for daring to consider dating again. Clenching her fist, she finally declares with fierce determination, "I will eat it." Imo hands her the pill. Closing her eyes, she swallows it in one gulp. The room gasps in disbelief, especially her relatives. For a few seconds, nothing seems to happen, and she wonders anxiously whether it is fake or poisonous. Su Sven seizes the moment to mock Imo, claiming he always knew he was a fraud. Then suddenly a guest cries out, urging everyone to look at Su Yalin's face and hair. Before their stunned eyes, her body begins to visibly rejuvenate, bathed in a radiant glow. When someone hands her a mirror, she stares in shock at her reflection. Her younger self returned. The transformation is undeniable and miraculous. Su Sven and the entire crowd are left speechless. Almost instantly, a wealthy woman rushes to Imo, desperately asking how much the pill cost. Calmly, Imo replies, 20,000 yuan per pill, and that he brought only 10 that night. The announcement triggers a frantic bidding war. Offers jump from 30,000 to 70,000 yuan within seconds. Watching all this with contempt, Jose scoffs internally, thinking that these people are fools for going crazy over a simple pill. He knows that the true treasure is far greater than anything they can imagine. The value was not in the pill itself, but in the process of making it. And he dreamed that if he could secure the agency rights, he might rise to power again. His wife, however, worriedly reminded him that their company was bankrupt, but he snapped at her harshly, threatening to slap her and continuing to speak nonsense. With a sinister smile, he reasoned that the young man knew nothing, and that if he could deceive him and buy enough time until Jingwen married into the Hang family, the Wang family's investment would return and the pill would eventually be in his hands. Suddenly, interrupting the auction, a wealthy man introduced himself as a member of the royal group and offered 200,000 to buy the agency rights. Instantly, another man from the Ling group countered loudly, declaring that they were willing to offer 1 million, leaving the first bidder completely stunned. Su Sven then stepped forward with a fake smile, reminding everyone that Mr. Y was the honored guest of his niece and that he would not cooperate with them. Turning to Imo in a friendly manner, he suggested they speak in private. In their conversation, he made a generous offer, 1.5 million for the agency rights, with profits to be split 30 to 70 after sales. Imo, skeptical, repeated the ratio and asked whether that meant he would receive 70%. With a greedy grin, Su Sven corrected him, saying that of course he would take 70% and Imo only 30. Since the Su family provided the channels, Su Jingwen then intervened coldly, asking whether the Su family even had any channels left. Furious, her uncle demanded to know what she meant, insisting they were family. Crossing her arms and looking at him with contempt, she revealed that he had mortgaged the company their grandmother left behind just last week to gamble in futures trading and lost 80 million. She asked him why he had not thought about the family then. Panicking, he denied everything and accused her of making things up. Calmly, she pulled out her phone and asked whether he wanted her to read out the Wang family's withdrawal letters and the bank's debt notices one by one. The revelation shocked her mother and aunt. Cornered and sweating, Su Sven stammered, asking how she had obtained this information and accusing her of investigating him. With deep disdain, Su Jingwen told him that he had come today simply to beg her mother for money, just as he once forced them to hand over their grandmother's company. She declared coldly that she would not give him a single cent. Watching him collapse in disgrace, she thought bitterly that he had tried to catch a wolf with bare hands despite not even having the 1.5 million he offered, clearly intending to swindle Imo. In desperation, he crawled toward his knees, begging for a chance to explain, then turned to his sister pleading for help. She looked at him with deep disappointment, saying she had only trusted him with their mother's company because he promised to change. Still desperate, he crawled toward his older sister, reminding her how she used to protect and spoil him as a child, begging her not to abandon him since he was the only man left in the family. She stared at him with endless sadness and finally stood up from her wheelchair with surprising strength and slapped him, declaring that since things had come to this, he would have to face the consequences alone. Su Jingwen then gave him the choices: either face a compulsory court liquidation and spend the rest of his life drowning in debt, or sell the company to her for a single yuan. Completely devastated, he realized he had no escape. Among the guests, someone mocked that Su Sven was simply suffering the results of his own actions. Later, Su Jingwen approached Imo and remarked that many powerful people were present at the banquet, offering to introduce him if he wished. She suggested that an agency fee of 2 million, allowing him to keep 80% of the profits, would be ideal, but warned him to choose his partner carefully. Imo replied that although this was true, as a partner he would only feel comfortable entrusting the business to her. That night, Su Jingwen drove Imo home in her luxury car, commenting that his place was not bad. He casually replied that he had rented it through an agent. As they said goodbye, she thanked him for accompanying her, and he replied that friends did not need such formalities. Slightly surprised, she repeated the word friends with a warm smile, extended her hand and confirmed that yes, they were friends. After she left, Imo stood watching the car disappear into the night, hands in his pockets, feeling peaceful. Under the moonlight, he sighed quietly, admitting to himself that this calm life felt unexpectedly good. When he opened his door, however, he sensed something wrong. The house was dark and silent. As the door creaked open, a pool of blood was visible on the floor, and in the dim light lay his little dog, motionless with a knife wound. Overcome with fury, Yemo's eyes glowed purple. He rushed to his pet, heart aching, and realized that the dog was still breathing. A healing talisman could save him. But as he focused on healing, a shadowed figure suddenly dropped from the ceiling to attack him. Yemo, fully aware of the ambush, remained still and waited for the right moment. The assassin lunged forward with a lethal strike, but an invisible barrier stopped the blade mid-air. Shocked and confused, the attacker froze. Seizing the moment, Yemo held his dog safely and kicked the assassin so hard that he flew across the room. The noise alerted other hidden thugs, who rushed in and saw their comrade defeated. Calmly, Yemo told his dog to leave first and that he would handle the rest. Surrounded by a purple aura, he asked chillingly whether they would attack together or line up to die one by one. One thug ordered everyone to charge, reminding them that young Master Zeng wanted Yemo alive but crippled. A man slashed at Yemo with a knife, but Yemo caught the blade between his fingers without flinching. In a brutal motion, he disarmed and slammed him to the ground. Terrified, the others froze as Yemo declared coldly that this was only the first. Another attacker swung a metal bar at him, but Yemo dodged it by inches, grabbed his arm, and snapped it instantly. The man screamed in agony before Yemo choked him and kicked him unconscious. As he fell, Yemo said calmly that this was the second. Realizing they were outmatched, the leader shouted for a change of plans. The leader orders his men to use their guns and shoot at Yemo's limbs, but Yemo moves faster than they can react, gliding between them like a ghost. In a chilling voice, he promises that he will use each of their own bones to make them regret their actions until they tell him exactly what he wants to know. His eyes burn with a deep, terrifying red as he delivers his threat. At the same time, in a dark room elsewhere, Senpenquiao stands before a table filled with cruel instruments. Smiling with twisted amusement, he approaches a bound figure on a hospital bed and laughs, saying that he originally thought he had caught a small fish, but instead, it turned out to be the woman every man in Nine City dreams of. The figure is revealed to be Su Jingwen, tied up and gagged. Senpenquiao mocks her, calling her the daughter of Counselor Su, when suddenly a medical machine beeps loudly, interrupting him. His phone rings, and he answers it impatiently, asking whether his men have already finished and if Yemo has been destroyed. To his shock, the voice on the other end calmly tells him that his men are permanently asleep. Recognizing the voice, Senpenquiao shouts Yemo's name in disbelief. From his house, standing among the unconscious attackers, Yemo laughs coldly and says that Sen has truly surprised him. Trying to regain control, Senpenquiao taunts Yemo, telling him to listen to the woman he has captured and making cruel remarks about Su Jingwen as she struggles helplessly. Yemo's rage explodes. His eyes blaze with a murderous red light. He orders Sen to release her immediately and swears that he will come to settle everything personally. Laughing wildly, Sen gives Yemo an ultimatum. He has only 40 minutes to arrive, or the entire city will witness what happens to her. He hangs up, leaving Yemo in a furious race against time. Yemo crushes his phone in his hand, the screen cracking as he silently vows that Senpenquiao will pay. Back in the mansion, Senpenquiao smirks at the tied-up Su Jingwen and suggests making a preview of what awaits her. She can only whimper through her gag in desperation. Suddenly, a piercing alarm blares through the building. Furious, Sen storms out to check what is happening, ordering his guards to stay and watch the prisoner. When the guards are left alone with Su Jingwen, a mysterious figure suddenly appears in the darkness. Before they can react, one guard is struck down with a powerful blow and collapses unconscious. In seconds, the room falls silent. Su Jingwen, still tied and gagged, stares in shock, and with tears in her eyes. She thinks of only one person, Yemo. A flashback reveals a delivery man on a motorcycle an hour earlier, complaining about having to deliver an important letter so late at night. He arrives at Yemo's address and reports to young Master Sen that Yemo has entered his home. He is then told that 6 assassins have already been sent there, and that Su Jingwen has also been captured and is being brought to Sen. Horrified, the delivery man watches as she is forced into a car. Realizing how dangerous the situation is, he decides to follow the kidnappers and send Yemo their location. He chases the car through the night until it reaches a grand, heavily guarded mansion. He calls Yemo to warn him that Sen has taken his wife there. Calmly, Yemo asks if the location is Pingai Street, number 32. Shocked that Yemo already knows, the delivery man listens as Yemo asks him to rescue Su Jingwen and get her out safely. Yemo swears that he himself will send Senpenquiao straight to hell. Inside the mansion, alarms continue to ring as Sen angrily questions his men about their security system. Meanwhile, the guards complain about their job and about not being able to touch the woman inside. Suddenly, a man wrapped in a purple aura, Su Wan, appears before them. With glowing red eyes, he warns that what he is about to do might hurt. In one devastating strike, he knocks one guard unconscious. He then reaches Su Jingwen, murmurs that Yemo will owe him for this rescue, and lifts her onto his shoulder. sprinting toward the back exit. Just as he is about to escape, a gunshot rings out. A bullet strikes his leg, and he collapses in pain, dropping Su Jingwen beside him. Sen Pengqiao appears laughing, boasting about his perfect aim, while his men flatter him. Su Wan stares in disbelief at how quickly Sen returned, smiling coldly. Sen declares that today is a wonderful day because he will enjoy tormenting them both. Recognizing Su Wan, he sneers at him. Injured but defiant, Su Wan rises and uses the unconscious Su Jingwen as a shield while taunting Sen. Thrilled by the situation, whispers excitedly about what he will do next. Surrounded by a purple aura, Su Wan prepares to fight, declaring that if Sen wants his life, he can come and take it. Meanwhile, outside the mansion, a lone figure approaches the main gate. The guards become tense and demand to know who is there. Yimo steps forward from the shadows, his presence overwhelming, radiating a deep crimson aura of fury. A guard places a hand on his shoulder and orders him to answer. Yimo's response is chilling. Yimo answers the guard with a single, devastating punch that lands squarely on his face, shattering his sunglasses. The force of the blow is so overwhelming that the guard is sent flying backward, crashing violently against the mansion's iron gate. The remaining guards stare in shock, unable to believe the inhuman strength they have just witnessed. Without hesitation, they rush toward Yimo with their batons raised, surrounding him on all sides. Yet Yimo moves with lethal grace, weaving through their attacks, while striking back with a rapid storm of punches and kicks wrapped in a blazing red aura. Every movement is precise and unstoppable, and within seconds all the guards collapse unconscious onto the ground. Defeated by Yemo's furious power, with burning eyes, Yimo announces his arrival in a cold voice, declaring that Zhang Benqiao has brought this upon himself. Inside the mansion, one of Zhang's men spits out broken teeth. Completely overwhelmed and surrounded by fallen bodies, Su Wan realizes there are simply too many enemies and that he cannot hold them off much longer. Filled with regret, he thinks that he should never have agreed to help Yimo, believing that he will fail to save Su Jingwen and feeling utterly helpless. Enjoying the scene, Sen Peniao mocks him cruelly, saying that when Su Wan dies, he will find his wife and child and send them to join him, piece by piece, laughing maniacally. Suddenly, a deafening impact shakes the entire room, sending Su Wan flying through the air. The explosion leaves Sen Benqiao stunned as he wonders who could have caused such destruction. Through the shattered doorway, a figure emerges from the smoke, surrounded by a purple aura. It is Yimo. His presence fills the room with overwhelming pressure as he declares in a voice filled with vengeance that he is the one who has come to send Sen Benqiao to hell. Seeing Yimo standing there amid the fallen guards, Su Wan can barely believe his eyes and asks in disbelief whether he has finally arrived. Ignoring him for the moment, Yimo tosses him a healing talisman and tells him to use it the same way as before. Trembling, Su Wan clutches the talisman as Yimo prepares for battle. Panicking, Zhang Benqiao points his gun and orders his men to kill Yimo. A storm of bullets erupts toward him, but Yimo moves with impossible speed. In the second stage of cultivation and using his cloud shadow step, he knows bullets are useless against him. He dodges every shot effortlessly and strikes down each shooter with brutal precision. Sen Benqiao watches in horror as Yimo becomes a blur of motion, defeating all his men in moments. Left alone and terrified, he turns and flees toward a secret escape door, shouting that he must reach the safe house. As he runs, he realizes that all the reports about Yimo were wrong. This is no weak castaway from the family, but someone with power rivaling noble clans. He reaches a reinforced metal door and desperately tries to enter the code, but his shaking fingers cause an error. Overcome with fear, he curses his bad luck when suddenly, the body of one of his guards crashes into the door, blocking his escape. Cornered, he tries to reason with Yimo, warning him that powerful people stand behind him. In desperation, he reveals that the Sun family wants Yimo dead, specifically naming Sun Seovan, the young master of the Sun clan, who seeks to kill him over rumors involving Ning Kingzu. Yimo listens coldly, realizing he has never even met her, and that this must be a conspiracy against him. Begging for his life, Sen Benqiao offers to help Yimo survive if he is spared, insisting that his value will become clear in the future. Yimo repeats the word your value with contempt, and then, without warning, delivers a crushing punch that sends Sen flying into the wall. Sen screams in pain as his arrogance is completely shattered. After defeating him, Yimo discovers a hidden room where several women, including Su Jingwen, are chained and imprisoned. Anger fills his eyes as he takes in the cruel sight, while unconscious guards lie scattered across the floor. With glowing white eyes, Yimo tells the women that whatever remains of Sen Benqiao's value now belongs to them. He throws the knife he picked up earlier, slicing through their chains and freeing them. The blade sticks into the floor as Yimo coldly states that Sen's life is now in their hands. Terrified and injured, Sen tries to bargain, offering all his money, but one woman picks up the knife, shaking with fury, and declares that she wants nothing from him except justice. Later, in the Grand Hall, Yimo uses a healing talisman on the unconscious Su Jingwen while Su Wan watches nearby. Su Wan tells Yimo to leave quickly since he has already called the police. but Yimo calmly says he will wait until they arrive. When Soo-won asks what he plans to do next, Yimo answers with icy determination. He will investigate Sun Seovan and destroy him completely when the time is right. Back at home, Yimo finishes training while his dog sleeps peacefully. Though Sen Benguiao is defeated, Yimo knows that Sun Seovan remains a serious threat. He resolves to find him and eliminate him. But his thoughts are interrupted by the doorbell. Opening the door, he is greeted respectfully as young master by a man in a suit, who hands him a formal invitation and an expensive outfit, saying that President Su sent them, and that Yimo may depart whenever he wishes. Confused, Yimo closes the door and immediately calls Su Jingwen, asking why she has sent him such a formal invitation, in suit, and what exactly she is planning. On the other end of the line, Su Jingwen, sitting in her office, responds with a calm smile, saying that she has already received the invitation. She asks Yimo whether he has noticed that it is a banquet hosted by the Su family. Yimo carefully examines the invitation, observing the official seal of the Su family, and then asks whether it is truly necessary for him to attend. Su Jingwen replies without hesitation that of course he must go. She explains that the Su family controls the largest pharmaceutical group in Ninggai, which would be extremely beneficial for the development and promotion of their pill. Then she adds an even more surprising reason. His former fiancée will also be present at the banquet. The revelation leaves Yimo completely stunned. Stammering slightly, he asked whether she means Ning Kingzu, the daughter of the Ning family, a woman said to be surrounded by an ethereal aura and blue spiritual flowers. Soon after, the scene shifts to the luxurious banquet hall. Su Jingwen gestures towards powerful men, standing in the distance, and introduces them to Yimo. She explains that one is Sun Pyre, the general agent of the Ace Group, and the other is Su Hunter, the president of the Hyan Group, both influential figures capable of shaking the entire business world of Ninggai with a single word. Yimo crosses his arms and with a faint look of disdain, wonders aloud whether people of such status would truly care about the Su family of Ninggai. Holding a glass of wine, Su Jingwen reminds him that he himself comes from a noble background and asks whether he really understands how powerful these families are. Smiling, she explains that merely being related to the Ning family is enough to make even top business elites eager to form connections. She then adds meaningfully that today's guest is none other than the true daughter of the Ning family herself. A low murmur spreads across the hall as everyone turns toward the entrance, waiting for the honored guests to arrive. Two women step inside in an impressive and graceful manner. One is recognized as the head of the Su family, while the woman beside her is Ning Kingzu. The moment she appears, Yimo senses something unusual. An immense spiritual energy radiates from her presence. Ning Kingzu, in turn, seems surprised as she observes Yimo, clearly sensing something extraordinary about him as well. Yimo studies her intently, wondering whether she is truly the former fiancée of the original owner of this body. As the head of the Su family greets the guest alongside Ning Kingzu, Yimo's mind races. He realizes that she is also a cultivator and begins to suspect that noble families must possess their own secret cultivation methods. Unlike ordinary cultivators, her spiritual energy is not hidden at all, as if she has no need to conceal her power. A powerful blue aura surrounds her, confirming his suspicions about her strength. Yimo concludes that she likely knows a great deal about Sun Seovan and silently decides to find an opportunity to question her later. Meanwhile, Su Jingwen approaches the head of the Su family with a warm and respectful smile. She greets her as Aunt Su and wishes her good health. Aunt Su asks politely about Su Jingwen's mother, mentioning that she heard she recently recovered from her illness, saying that truly blessed people are protected by heaven. Su Jingwen thanks her sincerely and explains that her mother's condition has been gradually improving. Then, on behalf of her mother, she presents the latest youth retention pill produced by her company, wishing Aunt Su eternal youth through its effects. And Su accepts the elegant box with visible interest and asks whether this is the famous youth retention pill that has been causing such a sensation recently. Instantly, whispers ripple through the banquet hall as guests remark that this is the newest model, extremely expensive and incredibly difficult to obtain. Ning Kingzu looks at the pill with curiosity, clearly intrigued by the excitement it has generated. Upon closer inspection, Aunt Su realizes that its quality is on the verge of becoming a true spiritual pill, meaning its creator must possess an exceptionally deep understanding of alchemy. She remarks that she knows all the top pill masters in the world, yet she cannot identify who refined such a masterpiece, especially since the pill bears no official seal. Su Jingwen then smiles and reveals that the pill was personally refined by her business partner and friend, Yimo. Yimo steps forward, casually, and greets everyone with a simple hello. The moment his name is mentioned, both Aunt Su and Ning Kingzu react in visible shock. Aunt Su approaches him, recognizing him instantly, and comments in disbelief that he has grown so much, and that she never imagined he could create such an extraordinary pill. Ning Kingzu, however, mutters coldly that the Y family truly failed to recognize real talent, referring to him dismissively as little uncle. she adds that in noble families, such alchemical skills are ultimately meaningless because cultivation strength is what truly matters. And Su agrees, stating that if Yimo had focused on cultivation instead, he might have long ago become an external elder of the Ning family. Listening carefully, Yimo confirms his suspicion that noble families possess cultivation techniques, though he considers them crude compared to the methods of the Oyu. Despite the criticism, and Su admits that she did not expect Yimo's pill mastery to be so profound and asks him directly, who is his master? The question stuns him. For a brief moment, his eyes flash red as a painful memory surfaces. The image of a red-haired woman appears in his mind, tied to betrayal and suffering from his past. Composing himself, he smiles mysteriously and replies that he refines pills simply for fun and has no master. Before he can ask anything further, a cheerful voice suddenly echoes through the hall. A tall man with white hair and an elegant suit enters the banquet, loudly wishing Aunt Su a happy birthday. His arrival instantly draws everyone's attention. Guests whisper among themselves, identifying him as the young master of the Sun family, someone who appeared once at a major family gathering in the capital. Aunt Su looks surprised to see him and addresses him as Seovan. The name Seovan strikes Yimo like lightning, and a bead of cold sweat slides down his back. He wonders anxiously whether this man could be the cultivator Senbenkiao warned him about. Seovan smiles charmingly and says that he absolutely had to attend Aunt Su's birthday, adding that it would have been disrespectful for Ning Kingzu not to come as well. His gaze then shifts to Su Jingwen, and he asks politely who she is. Aunt Su happily introduces her as Su Jingwen of the Su family. Seovan's eyes briefly scan Yimo with subtle interest before he extends his hand to Su Jingwen in greeting, introducing himself formally as Sun Seovan of the Sun family. But before Su Jingwen can respond, Yimo steps forward and firmly shakes his hand, declaring that he has long heard of the great reputation of young Master Sun. Seovan, however, looks at him with a faintly condescending smile and asks who he is. Yimo narrows his eyes, unsure whether Seovan truly does not recognize him or is pretending. Remembering that Senbenkiao claimed Seovan was a cultivator, Yimo introduces himself and subtly releases his spiritual energy through their handshake, attempting to probe Seovan's meridians. To his utter shock, he finds them completely empty, no trace of cultivation whatsoever. Confused, he wonders whether Seovan might not be a cultivator after all. Seovan abruptly pulls his hand back, repeats Yemo's name as if recognizing it for the first time, then quickly regains his composure. Smiling politely, he says it is a pleasure to meet Mr. The, then immediately ignores him and turns to Ning Kingzu, asking how she has been recently. Yimo frowns in suspicion. When Seovan spoke, his meridians showed no fluctuation, and there was no hint of hostility or killing intent. Even upon hearing Yemo's name, Yimo begins to doubt whether this man is truly his enemy. The banquet proceeds in a grand dining hall filled with laughter, conversation, and the clinking of glasses. After dinner, a butler announces that the lady of the Su family has prepared a ballroom and invites all guests to move there. The scene shifts to a dazzling dance floor where elegantly dressed couples glide gracefully across the room. Meanwhile, Yimo steps away from the crowd and stands alone before a large mirror, deep in thought. Sun Seovan did not appear to be a cultivator at all. Could Senbenkiao have lied to him? He quickly dismisses the idea, knowing there would be no reason for Senbenkiao to deceive him. Yet doubt lingers in his mind as he continues to watch the dancers from afar, silently contemplating what this all truly means. Meanwhile, Su Jingwen stood holding a glass of wine, her gaze fixed on Yemo's back as he walked down into the main ballroom. At that moment, a polite male guest approached her and respectfully asked her to dance. However, Su Jingwen replied coldly that she was not interested, leaving the man awkwardly scratching his head in embarrassment. His companion immediately scolded him, asking if he had lost his mind, explaining that this was Su Jingwen, the young miss of the Su family, not someone just anyone could approach casually. He went on to say that over the years, countless men had been rejected by her, and even the eldest young master of the Fan family had been no exception. He advised his friend to give up and leave, adding that in all these years, no one had ever heard of Su Jingwen taking the initiative to approach any man first. The rejected guest was left completely speechless. Suddenly, however, the friend gasped in shock as if he had just witnessed something unbelievable. Not only him, even Ning Kingzu turned around in astonishment, while the blonde girl beside her curled her lips into a meaningful smile. What left everyone stunned was Su Jingwen herself. She called out Yemo's name clearly across the hall, gracefully extended her hand, and openly invited him to dance with her. An unprecedented act. The two male guests stood frozen, unable to believe their eyes, exclaiming, "How could this be possible?" At the same time, Sun Seovan had already left the banquet and stepped outside, accompanied by his personal guards. Yimo silently followed at a distance, watching as all the subordinates bowed respectfully to greet the young master of the Sun family. Sun Seovan walked coldly toward a luxurious limousine waiting for him, and a subordinate hurried forward to open the door. Before getting in, he ordered that no one was allowed to approach the car. The bearded subordinate replied seriously. Understood. The limousine then slowly moved forward and drove away from the parking area. Once the car was far enough, one of the bodyguards began complaining in a low voice, saying that it was always the same every time the young master went out. He sent everyone away, even his personal guards, insisting on being alone in the car for reasons unknown. His companion immediately warned him to speak more quietly. The first guard continued whispering that he had heard rumors that the bodyguards chosen to accompany the young master later became very strange. They would stop recognizing their own families, as if they had become completely different people. A few days later, they would be replaced, and the previous bodyguard would disappear without a trace. Inside the limousine, a bizarre scene unfolded. Sun Seoven sat facing an exact copy of himself. Suddenly, the clone of Seoven slapped the bodyguard violently across the face, furiously calling him an idiot and demanding to know how he dared to take another woman's hand right in front of Ning Kingzu. The bodyguard panicked, trembling as he stammered out an apology. Meanwhile, the clone twisted a ring on his finger, releasing a strange blue electric current with a distorted, menacing face. He growled that if the bodyguard were not still useful, he would already be dead. With a sinister half-smile, he warned that if he could not even handle such matters properly, he could only pray that his death would not be too painful. At that moment, the clone's true identity was revealed. He was the real Sun Seoven of the Sun family, his eyes glowing with a deadly blue light. Then the limousine door opened, and a pair of clean, elegant white shoes stepped out. The true Sun Seoven exited the vehicle. His subordinates bowed once again in respect. He ordered 2 of the bodyguards to follow him back into the ballroom, and they obeyed without hesitation. One guard, watching from afar, muttered that just as the rumors said, the young master had come out alone again. He wondered what had happened inside the car. While inside, the fake Sun Seoven lay tied up and gagged, helplessly groaning in pain with tears streaming down his bruised face. Back in the grand ballroom, classical music filled the air as a live orchestra played elegantly. The real Sun Seoven reappeared, greeting Ning Kingzu and apologizing, saying that something urgent had come up. Ning Kingzu's attention shifted, and Seoven's gaze fell toward the center of the dance floor. His eyes widened in surprise when he saw Su Jingwen dancing with a man he did not recognize at all. Yimo and Su Jingwen glided gracefully across the floor, drawing the attention of both Sun Seoven and Ning Kingzu. Su Jingwen's cheeks were flushed with excitement as she moved in rhythm with the music and Yemo's presence. Yimo, with a drop of sweat on his forehead, also seemed to enjoy the moment, sharing a subtle smile with her. To the soft melody of the piano, the 2 executed elegant spins and coordinated steps, becoming the center of everyone's attention. Leaning closer, Su Jingwen whispered that his dancing was very good. Yimo only smiled nervously. She reminded him softly that this was still a social dance, and that they needed to act naturally so she could properly promote their youth preservation pill to the Su family. Yimo inwardly thought that fortunately, the original owner of this body had learned ballroom dancing in the Y family, combined with his enhanced physical coordination from cultivation. Otherwise, this would have been a disaster. From a distance, and Su remarked to Ning Kingzu that she had not expected Yimo to be such a good dancer. Ning Kingzu scoffed coldly, saying that dancing was meaningless, and that in the end, he was still just an ordinary person. And Su laughed teasingly, pointing out that just moments ago, Ning Kingzu could not take her eyes off him. At that moment, Sun Seoven joined their conversation, commenting that Mr. The was quite skilled at dancing. When Ansu asked whether he truly did not know Yimo, he smiled and said that this was indeed their first meeting. Ansu replied sharply that with the immense power of the Sun family, surely they could investigate the background of a mere abandoned son. Sun Seoven laughed, saying that Ninggai City was the Su family's territory, and that he would never overstep his bounds. Ansu stated that she did not care about the schemes of noble families, but Yemo's talent in the Tao of pills was undeniable. Meanwhile, Yemo calmly sipped his wine, thinking that he only wished to plant a few seeds for the future of alchemy. Watching him, Ansu declared firmly that she would not ignore him in the future. This angered Sun Seoven inwardly. He thought bitterly that if it were not for Ning Kingzu, he would have already dealt with Ansu. His gaze then fell on Yimo, whom he secretly despised as trash. Nearby, the 2 male guests from earlier were still gossiping. One said that Yemo's name sounded familiar. The other suddenly realized that he was Ning Kingzu's former fiancé and wondered how he dared to appear in front of young master Sun. They concluded that since Yimo had been expelled from the Y family, his only chance at rising again was to cling to Ning Kingzu. Just then, Ning Kingzu turned to leave, and Su asked why she was leaving so soon when she had said she wanted to relax. Ning Kingzu replied that she was tired and wanted to rest, and Su smiled gently at her. However, instead of walking away, Ning Kingzu suddenly stopped and called out Yemo's name sharply. He looked at her curiously while holding his wine glass. With a cold and serious expression, she warned him that she knew exactly what he was planning, but advised him to give up. She told him that the relationships between noble families were far more complex than he could imagine, and that their strength was beyond his reach. She said it was pointless for him to try to get close to her to deal with the family. Yimo listened calmly, puzzled, wondering what she was even talking about. Turning her back to him, Ning Qingzu told him to focus on alchemy. Even if it was not very useful, at least it would allow him to survive. Yimo simply raised his glass and took another sip, completely unfazed by her condescending words. As she walked away, she added one last warning, telling him to behave himself. Yimo smirked inwardly, wondering whether she was talking about him or herself. Suddenly, Ning Qingzu stopped, sensing something strange. She turned around in shock. Yimo looked at her with a piercing gaze and revealed that the spiritual energy in her body was not being released, intentionally rather. She could no longer suppress it. Shocked, her body suddenly wrapped in a surging blue aura. Ning Qingzu stared at Yimo in disbelief and exclaimed, asking how it was possible that he knew such a thing. At the same time, Yimo silently reflected that although her cultivation method granted rapid progress, it was unquestionably a path of self-destruction. With a grave expression, he told her the blunt truth. In other words, her body was already failing. The two of them moved to a quieter, more secluded corner of the hall. The tension between them thickened the air. Yimo stepped closer with a faint, confident smile and asked how someone as ordinary as him could possibly know this. Yet in the same breath, he calmly assured her that not only did he understand her condition, but he could also help resolve the problem within her body. Qingzu looked at him with clear suspicion and asked directly why she should trust him. Yimo replied with infuriating calm that she was free not to believe him. After all, he was not the one in danger. However, his tone turned cold as he warned her that the reality was simple. She did not have much time left. This revelation visibly shook her. Leaning slightly closer, Yimo proposed that she could treat this as a deal, because he wanted her to do him a favor in return. With an enigmatic smile, he revealed that the favor was to deliver something to Sun Seoven. While Yimo and Qingzu spoke privately, far in the distance Sun Seoven watched them with a chilling gaze. His face twisted in anger, his eyes flickering with an icy blue light as he clenched his teeth and muttered Yimo's name under his breath. The banquet eventually came to an end, and the guests began to disperse. Strolling through the illuminated gardens of the mansion, Yimo and Su Jingwen also walked out together, arm in arm along a quiet path. Suddenly, Su Jingwen called his name, making him turn toward her. At that moment, Aunt Su approached them with a warm, radiant smile, telling Jingwen that she was very interested in the phase preservation pill and asking if they could talk. The three of them continued walking through the tranquil garden beneath the starry night sky. Yimo then asked Aunt Su directly whether she sought him out only because of his appearance. She laughed, saying that by seniority he should call her Aunt Su, but Yimo rejected this coldly, stating that he was no longer part of the Y family and would not dare to claim such familiarity. Aunt Su sighed softly and said that he and Qingzu were actually very similar, which puzzled Yimo. She explained that both of them had been sacrificed by their families. After Qingzu's parents died, her freedom had been completely controlled by the Ning family, including her marriage. Fortunately, Qingzu had been chosen by an ancient martial aristocratic clan, granting her the opportunity to become an immortal cultivator. Yet Aunt Su warned that unless she fully transcended the mortal realm, she would never truly be free. Su Jingwen gasped in astonishment, repeating the words immortal cultivator and transcendence in disbelief. Yimo immediately understood. Transcendence must refer to the third stage of cultivation, a massive turning point with an enormous leap in power. He realized that in order to advance quickly, Qingzu had chosen an extremely ancient cultivation method that no one else used anymore, one that placed her body in a constant state of deficit, trading her lifespan for cultivation strength. Yimo asked Aunt Su why she was telling him all this. With regret, she admitted that she had tried to treat Qingzu's body but had no way to cure her. She added with a sigh that it was the same situation as Su Jingwen's mother. No method seemed effective. However, she then looked meaningfully at Yimo and said that his healing talisman had been what saved Su Jingwen's mother. She continued, saying that his phase preservation pill was something she herself could not create, and that his alchemical theory far surpassed any master she knew. In him, she saw a new hope. Su Jingwen stood stunned, thinking to herself how it was possible that Aunt Su, president of the traditional Chinese Medicine Association, would admit she could not compare to Yimo. She added aloud that Yimo did not just refine pills but could also create talismans and other mystical items, making her wonder if he might truly be a legendary immortal cultivator. Yimo, meanwhile, thought dismissively that compared to the cultivation system of the Luyu continent, this world was truly backward. Aunt Su then turned to him and said that she was very interested in his pill, and that, on behalf of the Su family enterprises, she wished to establish close cooperation with him. Su Jingwen joyfully hugged Aunt Su, exclaiming that with her protection, their pill profits would increase at least tenfold. Aunt Su laughed and affectionately called her a little money grabber. Then, with a serious expression, she asked Yimo that if he ever had the chance in the future, she hoped he would save Qingzu. She explained that deep down, Qingzu was a very sensitive and fragile person and revealed that when their engagement was cancelled, King Zu had actually resisted it. This left Imo silent and thoughtful. At that moment, Sun Se-oven's voice suddenly called out to Aunt Sue from a distance. He approached with a polite smile and said that before leaving, he wanted to personally bid her farewell. Aunt Sue replied that he was very considerate. Sun Se-oven then pretended to notice Imo and Su Jingwen with mild surprise and greeted them insincerely. With a fake smile, he said that today had felt like meeting an old friend at first sight and extended his hand to Imo, saying he looked forward to seeing him again. Imo smiled enigmatically and replied that he was certain they would meet very soon. Their handshake was tense, filled with unspoken hostility. Suddenly, Imo's eyes widened in surprise. This time, he clearly sensed spiritual energy within Sun Se-oven, who was now faintly wrapped in a powerful purple aura. After the handshake, Sun Se-oven turned calmly and walked toward his limousine. Just as he was about to enter, a guard informed him that Miss Ning had sent him a gift, already placed inside the car. Inside the limousine, Sun Se-oven opened the box with a curious smile, wondering aloud whether King Zu had truly sent him something. Inside, he found a green paper butterfly. Confused, he handed the box to his double and ordered him to keep it safe and not open it carelessly. The double nervously agreed. Sitting alone, Sun Se-oven sneered, thinking that Sen Benqiao had messed everything up so badly that he had been forced to act personally. Yet, Imo was still nothing but trash in his eyes. As he turned his glowing ring, the names of Su and Imo echoed in his mind like a curse. Grinding his teeth in fury, he swore that they would all pay. Suddenly, Imo's voice echoed coldly in his mind, promising that he would make Ning King Zu kill him with her own hands. The double inside the car was utterly terrified and confused. When he opened the box again, the green paper butterfly began glowing with an ethereal light, revealing its true nature. The scene then shifted to a towering skyscraper beneath the night sky. On the rooftop, Imo stood under the full moon, gazing across the city. A glowing butterfly, the tracking rune he had sent, landed on his finger. He recalled that he had warned Sun Se-oven they would meet again soon. The luminous butterfly flew off, tracing a radiant path through the night, and finally hovering above a specific building, clearly one of the Sun family's properties. Standing on the edge of the rooftop, Imo smirked and leapt into the void with incredible agility, declaring that it was time to begin his operation. Inside that building, a woman examined two spiritual plants on display, the golden mystic flower and the water spirit mushroom. She thought eagerly that in just a few more days, they would be ready for harvest, allowing her to attend the cultivator conference in 3 months to exchange resources. Suddenly, she sensed a presence behind her and spun around sharply, demanding to know who was there. A deep voice praised her, saying that even while gravely injured and having lost her realm, she was still worthy of being a genius of the 100 Herbs sect, as her sensitivity to spiritual energy had not weakened. A bald monk slowly emerged from the shadows. A drop of cold sweat ran down her forehead as she realized she was facing other cultivators. With a defiant expression, she demanded to know who they were and what they wanted in her home, silently calculating that if there was only one cultivator, she might still have a cha. She almost escapes, or at least that is what she believes. But the bald monk abruptly interrupts her thoughts. In a calm yet sinister tone, he asks whether she is perhaps planning to flee, noting that her mind seems restless. At that moment, a second monk appears, tall, broad-shouldered, and smiling faintly. He remarks that even a lion uses its full strength when hunting a rabbit, suggesting that to be absolutely certain, it is better for them to act together. Seeing both cultivators blocking her path, she scoffs sarcastically, saying they truly think highly of her if they sent to people just to capture her. Quickly regaining her composure, she smiles calculatingly and asks what the true purpose of their visit is. The muscular monk replies serenely that they have come to invite benefactor Su to accompany them, and he hopes she will not make things difficult. However, the thinner monk grows impatient and bluntly tells his senior brother to stop wasting time. They should simply break her limbs and take her by force. In response, she places her hand on a strange carnivorous plant and coldly challenges them, asking what they think this place is. The plant suddenly trembles as she releases her power, declaring that since they have come here, they will stay here forever. A glowing cloud of spores erupts into the air. The bald monk gasped in shock, exclaiming, "What is that thing?" Meanwhile, the muscular monk covers his mouth in horror, realizing that the substance is poisonous. With a sly, malicious smile, she reveals that holding green heart grass in one's mouth can protect against the toxic miasma of the Supreme Lord Flower, a poison strong enough to kill even an elephant. She wonders aloud whether this will at least delay them for a while. Clutching the green herb between her teeth, she steels herself, knowing that she must escape because she stands no chance against the cultivators. But just as she prepares to flee, an overwhelming presence freezes her in place. From the darkness, terrifying red eyes glow ominously, paralyzing her with fear. Trembling, she stammers, What is this?" A massive, shadowy figure materializes before her. Panicking, she wonders if this could be the legendary Shadow Arts. Another silhouette emerges from the darkness, and she gasps, asking if he belongs to the hidden sects. The newcomer calmly confirms that yes, they are the very same hidden sects that destroyed the 100 Herbs sect in the past. Trapped by a surging purple energy, she demands to know who he truly is, reminding him that the agreed date has not yet arrived. When she finally looks up at his face, her shock turns into disbelief as she cries out, because the man standing before her is Yimo, disguised as Sun Seovan. Grinning darkly, Yimo asks why it should be impossible for him to be here, and whether she is truly so surprised to see him, head of the Su family. Meanwhile, at Sun Shaolan's residence, two guards chat lazily while standing watch. One yawns and thinks about the upcoming shift change, while the other suggests eating oden later to warm up. As they idly wonder what young Master Sun might be eating tonight, a silent purple aura slips through the corridor without them noticing. Using his cloud stepping technique, Yimo infiltrates the building, thinking to himself that his enemies had better be ready. The glowing tracking butterfly in his hand confirms that he has reached Sun Seovan's residence. It stops in front of a wooden door, illuminating the hallway with its green light. Yimo follows it, realizing that the rune has led him to this specific room. Yet when he extends his spiritual perception, he frowns, sensing that his true target is not inside. Elsewhere, in a dim and depressing apartment, Sun Shan's double sits alone eating instant noodles. Amid scattered empty bottles, bitter and resentful, he screams in frustration, asking whether he ever truly had a choice in his life. He wonders why he must live like trash when the real Sunshan enjoys luxury, wealth, and power. His anger explodes as he grips his fork so hard that it bends in his hand. His eyes turn bloodshot as he curses his fate, asking why he must suffer just because he shares the same face as the real young master. A painful memory flashes inside a car, where the real Sunshan coldly stared at him while he lay bound and helpless. The true Sunshan's voice echoes in his mind, warning him that if his identity is ever exposed, he knows the consequences. He reminds the double that his very existence was granted by him, and that a fake can never become the original. In tears, the double is ordered to abandon his dreams, because his only purpose in life is to be a shadow. Back in the present, his rage boils over. He shouts that if they don't want him touching the box, he will open it anyway. Ignoring the warning, he lifts the lid, and the paper butterfly inside begins to glow green. It suddenly flies out, making him scream in shock. What is that thing? He cries. In an instant, a dark silhouette of Yimo appears behind him and coldly asks who he is. Panicking, the double lunges at him in a desperate attack. But Yimo casually knocks him to the ground with terrifying ease. As Yimo slowly approaches, the double realizes with horror that he cannot sense any killing intent from him. Terrified, he finally recognizes Yimo from the banquet and demands to know what he wants, warning him to stay back while claiming to be Sun Xian of the Sun family. In an emotionless voice, Yimo declares that he is nothing but a counterfeit, his eyes blazing red as he demands to know where the real Sun Xian is. Meanwhile, in a dark alley, a thug brags over the phone that dealing with the university brat will be easy. He confirms that they have already investigated and that the boy will definitely pass through this alley on his way home. Smiling cruelly, he promises they will break his legs, tie him up, and drag him away. Just then, one of his men alerts him that the target is approaching. Indeed, Yimo calmly walks into the trap with his hands in his pockets, completely unfazed. As he walks, Yimo reflects that this world truly possesses spiritual artifacts. He wonders whether powerful cultivators of at least the fourth stage might be backing the aristocratic families. He knows that spiritual artifacts are forged by infusing spiritual energy into objects, and that only cultivators of the fourth stage or higher should be capable of creating them. Yet due to the scarcity of spiritual energy in this world, such a thing should be nearly impossible, unless the Sun family possesses a hidden spiritual source. Realizing this, he decides that after dealing with Sun Seovan, he must go to Lushi as soon as possible to locate this source and strengthen his cultivation. Suddenly, a voice interrupts his thoughts. A group of thugs emerges from the shadows, surrounding him completely. Their eyes glow red in the darkness as their leader sneers that they have been waiting for him for a long time. He mockingly tells Yimo that someone has paid a high price for his legs, and asks whether he will break them himself or needs help. Yimo remains silent, as a dangerous purple aura begins to radiate from his body. The thug leader feels a chill from Yimo's gaze, and wonders what kind of person he is facing. Shaking off his fear, he shouts the order to kill. The men charge forward screaming, but in the blink of an eye, Yimo moves like a ghost, crushing them one by one with terrifying speed and strength. The leader stands frozen in disbelief, stammering, What the hell is this? Before he can react, Yimo delivers a devastating punch charged with purple energy, sending another thug crashing to the ground unconscious. Watching his men fall, the leader trembles in terror, questioning whether Yimo is even human. Yimo then lifts him by the throat and demands, in an icy voice, to know who ordered this attack. The scene shifts to the Su family estate, where investigators are already examining the glass garden. Ninxing arrives as one of her subordinates hands her a report, explaining that they have recovered the surveillance footage from the security cameras. The security footage from the rooftop is displayed. It shows a group of people climbing over the perimeter wall at around 1 a.m., confirming that the head of the Su family had indeed been abducted. The investigator explains that although the footage is limited, the sequence of events is clear. There were 3 attackers, and the face of one of them was captured clearly by the camera. As Ninxing reviews the recording, she clenches her teeth in rage when she recognizes that one of the attackers was among the guests at the banquet that same day. In her mind, an image of Yimo smiling sinisterly appears, marking him as the prime suspect. The scene shifts to Yemo's quiet residence. A black limousine comes to a halt in front of the entrance. Ninxing steps out with a frigid expression and checks her phone. On the screen appears a photo of the house along with the address, No. 432, Hyangshan Road, confirming that this is the correct location. She grips her phone tightly, furious, thinking to herself how Yimo dared to lay a hand on her family. At that moment, a muscular man with his arm in a sling, Son, approaches her and asks whether she is here to find young Master the. Surprised, she demands that he take her to him, realizing that Yimo truly has subordinates, which makes her even more anxious about what might have happened to her little aunt. Son informs her that young Master the is in the courtyard and leads her inside. As she enters, Ninxing is stunned to see several men working in the garden. She thinks to herself that Yimo really does have many followers, even though they all appear to be ordinary people. One of the thugs, Yimo defeated earlier, respectfully approaches and offers her a glass of water, asking whether the temperature is suitable for young Master the. Suddenly, an angry shout shatters the calm atmosphere. Yimo turns and sees that it is Ninxing. Striding toward him in fury, she offers a deal. Since he is just an ordinary person, if he orders his subordinates to release her little aunt, she will let the matter go. Yimo straightens in his chair, completely bewildered, asking what she means by subordinates and little aunt. She points at him accusingly, demanding to know why he kidnapped her aunt. Realizing the situation, his expression darkens as he asks whether she means that the head of the Su family has been kidnapped and whether she suspects him, mocking him for pretending to be innocent. She shows him a tablet containing the surveillance footage, shouting that she never expected his crimes to be recorded so clearly. On the screen, a figure identical to Yimo stands beside Suna on the rooftop, with the exact time of the incident displayed. The image zooms in on the kidnapper's face, revealing a chilling smile that seems to prove his guilt beyond doubt. Watching the video, Yimo thinks that whoever used his face to abduct Suna must have used a spiritual artifact. He wonders whether Sun Saoven's goal was to create conflict between him and Ninxing. Ignoring his reasoning, Ninxing releases her power and demands that he hand over her aunt immediately, threatening to make him experience the might of a cultivator if he refuses. Calmly, Yimo explains that at 1:30 a.m. he was not at her aunt's residence, and although he knows she will not believe him, people sent by Sun Saoven can testify for him. This leaves her confused, and she asks incredulously whether those men are not simply his own subordinates. One of the thugs steps forward and shows her chat history, proving that young Master Sun ordered Yimo to be lured to his territory before personally taking him away. Still unconvinced, she challenges him directly, asking how he explains his face appearing on the security footage. Without panicking, Yimo takes out his own phone and plays a video, saying that by coincidence he recorded his whereabouts as backup evidence and invites her to watch. In the video, the body double explains how Sun Sheon used the ring on his hand to change his appearance and disguise himself as a subordinate to follow Yimo, planning to reveal his true identity only when safe. The man introduces himself as Xian, stating that he is Sun Saoven's body double whose job is to ensure his safety, and that he was the one impersonating him at the banquet. Ninxing is utterly stunned, realizing with horror that Sun Saoven can alter his appearance. Yimo explains seriously that he possesses a spiritual artifact capable of changing one's face. She covers her mouth in shock, understanding how precious such artifacts are even among aristocratic families. Yimo concludes that Sun Sheon's plan was to disguise himself as Yimo, kidnap her aunt, then kill Yimo and frame him without witnesses. Enraged, Ninxing declares she will go after Sun Saoven, but Yimo stops her, warning that doing so would only alert the enemy and place her aunt in even greater danger. Desperate, she asks what they can do if they cannot act. Folding his arms calmly, Yimo suggests that since Sun Saoven has laid a trap, they should play along and lure him into his own scheme. Smiling darkly, he says they will invite him to fall into his own snare. Elsewhere, a man screams in agony as he is choked, purple flames radiating from his body before he is thrown to the ground. The true sunshine stands over him enveloped in a purple aura, commenting coldly that the taste of an ordinary person is indeed mediocre. He turns to the muscular monk and asks whether everything is ready. The monk explains that the life energy of common people is no longer enough to sustain Sun Saoven's cultivation. Fortunately, once he devours the life energy of the surviving member of the 100 Herb sect, he will be able to enter the ranks of cultivators, adding that his junior brother has already captured her. Greedy and excited, Sun Shaowen clenches his fist and declares that once he reaches the first cultivation stage, he will secure a seat on the Elders' Council and recommend the monks to the hidden sect. The muscular monk bows gratefully. At that moment, the other monk arrives and reports that Gaong has captured Yimo, asking how Sun Seoven wishes to deal with him. Sun Seoven burst into maniacal laughter and orders that Yimo be sent to Gaian Temple, but strictly kept alive, because he wants to personally tear out his tongue before handing him to Ninqing. The scene shifts to the imposing Gaian Temple, where men in suits guard the entrance. One guard scolds the others for chatting, reminding them that young Master Sun paid them to watch over the captive, not to relax. Another guard mocks him quietly, saying he is treating something trivial as if it were of supreme importance. Suddenly, news arrives that young Master Sun has come in person. Sun Seoven strides in wearing an elegant white suit, radiating arrogance so overwhelming that all subordinates bow their heads. Sang nervously asks why the young master came personally, but Sun Seoven dismisses the concern, telling everyone to remain calm. Then he orders Sang to discard all communication devices and bring the fully wrapped captive down the mountain with him. Shocked by the strange command, Sang hesitates, and Sun Shan turns toward him with burning purple eyes, asking coldly whether he needs permission to act. Terrified, Sang immediately obeys and withdraws the men without further questions. Left alone in the courtyard, Sun Sha murmurs that something feels very wrong. Meanwhile, Sang walks away sweating, secretly thinking that the fact that the young master addressed him only by name is highly unusual. A white truck starts up and speeds away from the ancient temple into the night. The garden was cleared, and the subordinates were led far away from the scene just as planned. In the courtyard, a soldier ordered the masked man to escort Yimo, hands bound, inside to present him before young Master Sun. The hooded lackey shoved Yimo's shoulder roughly and growled that he had better behave and know his place. Suddenly, sharp applause echoed through the air, interrupting the guard and drawing everyone's attention. Sun Seoven appeared with a solemn air, flanked by two bald bodyguards. He smiled with perfect falsehood and said that he and Mr. The were meeting again. Yimo recognized his enemy instantly. His gaze turned razor-sharp as he coldly asked what Sun Seoven intended to do with him. Standing arrogantly in the center of the courtyard, Sun Seoven sneered and mocked him, asking whether he had ever imagined such a miserable ending. Stepping closer with a grim expression, he sarcastically asked with the overwhelming confidence Yimo had shown at the banquet had gone. Then, suddenly furious, he widened his eyes and shouted that Yimo was nothing but vermin for daring to speak with Ninqing right in front of him, jabbing a finger into Yemo's chest. Sun Seoven admitted that his biggest mistake had been letting the useless Shen Penshao act, which was the only reason Yimo had survived. Unmoved, Yimo calmly explained his relationship with Penshao and then asked Sun Seoven what his real reason for targeting him was. Sun Seoven gave a twisted, sinister smile. Behind his glasses, his eyes gleamed with murderous intent as he vaguely questioned the reason himself. Then, exploding in rage, he roared that the very fact that trash, like Yimo had once been Ninqing's fiancé, was an unbearable stain on his life, declaring that she belonged to him alone. Yimo stared at him coldly, as if looking at a madman, and asked in disdain whether he really wanted to kill him over something so ridiculous. Sun Seoven suddenly burst into wild laughter as a surge of purple energy swirled around him. He shook his head, saying that killing Yimo now would be too much of a waste. A gigantic purple shadow manifested behind him. Standing proudly, Sun Seoven declared that a mere mortal like Yimo would never in his life have witnessed such a grand miracle. Yimo narrowed his eyes, carefully observing the strange entity and silently evaluating whether it was a summoning technique or some kind of demonic art. Sun Seoven then revealed his dark ambition. He planned to sacrifice Sauna's body, which possessed extraordinary vitality, and offer it to the shadow in order to fully enter the immortal cultivation realm. His face twisted with extreme excitement, his eyes burning with ambition as he swore that he would become the supreme god, worshipped by all mortals. Still calm, Yimo questioned him, asking that if he were truly so powerful, why he hadn't killed him outright instead of keeping him alive. Smiling smugly while stroking the ring on his hand, Sun Seoven revealed that he had intentionally left clues about the kidnapping so that Ninqing would believe Yimo was the culprit and come to kill him. Standing tall in the darkness surrounded by blue-violet flashes, he prepared to deliver the final verdict of his perfect trap. Pointing at Yimo with a triumphant grin, he slandered him as the kidnapper and murderer of Suna. Instead of panicking, Yimo simply curled his lips into a mocking, meaningful smile and calmly remarked that Sun Seoven had just confessed everything himself. In the midst of his triumph, Sun Seoven froze, frowning suspiciously as he demanded to know what Yimo meant. With effortless ease, Yimo broke free from his bindings, turned around, and asked the mysterious masked figure behind him whether they had heard the confession clearly. The figure slowly raised a hand and lifted the visor of the cap. A cold female voice confirmed that she had heard every single word without missing anything. When the mask was removed, Ninqing appeared, eyes blazing with fury, Clenching her teeth, she declared that she had heard everything perfectly. Sun Se-oven panicked upon seeing the woman he desired most. Stammering desperately, he tried to justify himself, claiming that Suna was still safe and that he had only been joking to scare Yimo. Ninqing did not even bother to listen. Her aura erupted violently, unleashing a powerful wind as she shouted that he must release her little Anne immediately. A green spiritual glow enveloped her as she warned that if he refused, she would not spare the Sun family. Realizing he had fallen into a trap, Sun Se-oven turned to Yimo with a twisted face full of hatred and roared like a madman for daring to outplay him. Yimo smiled with satisfaction and calmly reminded him that he had admitted his own crimes. Closing his eyes briefly and shaking his head, Yimo mocked that he could only conclude one thing. Sun Se-oven was truly unbearably stupid. His eyes snapped open, sharp and icy, filled with contempt that pierced Sun Se-oven's pride. Enraged, Sun Se-oven screamed Yemo's name, his fury shaking the air as his eyes glowed ominously. Ignoring him, Ninqing urged Yimo to leave, explaining that she had already notified the Zhu family and that the situation was under control for now. Looking at him worriedly, she warned seriously that Sun Se-oven was a powerful cultivator, someone a mere mortal like Yimo should not confront. Seeing them so close together, Sun Se-oven ground his teeth in jealousy and shouted furiously, asking how they dared to treat him as if he did not exist. Losing all reason, he pointed and ordered his bodyguards to kill Yimo immediately to erase the humiliation. Ninqing instantly stepped in front of Yimo. A brilliant blue flame erupted around her as she firmly declared that no one would act. But the two bald cultivators did not hesitate. They channeled their energy and charged straight into battle with deadly determination. At the same time, Sun Se-oven raised a shining phone threateningly, forcing Ninqing to choose between Yimo and Suna's life, because with one call, her aunt would die instantly. Frozen in despair, Ninqing realized she was trapped. Just then, Yimo calmly stepped forward to shield her and said there was nothing to worry about, leaving her stunned. He then showed her a photo on his phone, announcing that he had already rescued Suna and that she was being safely carried away at that very moment. Seeing the image, Sun Se-oven turned pale with horror, unable to believe that Yimo had secretly broken through his defenses. Staring at the surveillance screen that now showed an empty room with dangling chains, he screamed inwardly, wondering where his useless subordinates had gone. Time rewinds 15 minutes to the foot of the mountain behind Gaian Temple, where Sun Se-oven had gathered all his men to guard the captive and prepare his plan. Standing proudly among his guards, he ordered everyone to stay in position and wait for the right moment to intimidate his enemies. Then he casually walked away to make his threatening call, unaware that disaster was already approaching. While secretly checking his phone among the trees, he suddenly received a message from Yimo, stating that Suna had already been brought down the mountain safely and that only the arrival of the Su family remained. Fury exploded within him as his purple aura blazed violently. Grinding his teeth, he realized one of his men must have betrayed him. Looking at Yimo from afar, fear crept into his heart as he understood that Yimo had calculated every step with terrifying precision. Under the sunlight, facing Yemo's calm and icy gaze, Sun Se-oven began to doubt, wondering whether this man was truly the useless member of the family. Losing all composure, he pointed and screamed at his guardians to kill Yimo immediately, declaring that he himself would hold back Ninqing. The two giants charged forward with a crushing momentum that made the ground tremble. Ning cursed under his breath and pulled Yemo's hand to flee. Suddenly, a brilliant, devastating purple energy palm shot from the enemy's hand, tearing through the air and chasing them relentlessly, forcing them to barely dodge lethal and treacherous attacks. Out of nowhere, glowing pink energy bands appeared and tightly bound Ninzu's limbs. She struggled in vain and screamed in terror that she could no longer move. From above, Sonovan laughed wildly, forcing her to watch the miserable death of Yimo, while Ninqing cried out desperately for him to run. At the same time, Sonovan's bodyguards launched a simultaneous attack, determined to finish Yimo. Sun Se-oven sneered with an evil smile, declaring, "Min Kingzu, you can protect nothing. Trapped." Ninyu trembled in horror and lamented, "This is all my fault. I underestimated the enemy too much. I never should have come with him." Despite being surrounded, Yimo remained calm, channeling his energy and preparing for battle. Suddenly, he moved at blinding speed, vanishing and leaving both bodyguards completely bewildered. Appearing instantly behind one of them, Yimo grabbed his head. As the thug screamed in disbelief, Yimo used his cloud shadow step and slammed him brutally into the ground. The display of power left Ning stunned, mouth open in shock as she wondered, how can Yemo's strength be so overwhelming? The second bodyguard was sent flying through the air with unstoppable force. Then, the first defeated thug began, dissolving grotesquely into a yellow liquid that bubbled on the ground and moved on its own. In moments, the liquid swirled upward and reshaped itself back into his body. The regenerated guard shouted furiously, "This is a body substitution talisman that cost us dearly. How dare you?" But before he could finish, cold sweat ran down his face as he sensed Yimo behind him, eyes glowing red. With devastating speed, Yimo struck him with a spirit energy punch that sent him flying again. Watching from afar, Sun Seoven muttered in amazement that such speed was clearly not that of an ordinary person. Wrapped in crackling blue aura, Yimo stood tall as Sun Seoven whispered in disbelief. Yimo, you are actually a cultivator. Realization left Ning Kingzu, completely stunned as she exclaimed, what? Yimo is a cultivator. Calmly advancing, his feet wrapped in spiritual flames, Yimo told San Sabin, I have actually always wanted to meet you. Clenching his fist, his spiritual energy burned as he recalled every crime of his enemy. How they sent him to prison, hired people to attack him, arranged for Zhang Pengqiao to hunt him, kidnapped his friend, and hurt his dog. These actions endangered his Jingwen and everyone he cared about. Yimo declared that from the beginning, Sun Xian had been nothing but a buzzing fly around him. With red burning eyes, he warned that he had tolerated it for too long. And now it was time to silence him. Standing victoriously over the defeated guard, Yimo faced Sonobin, who remained unmoved. Sun Seoven scoffed that it did not matter if Yimo was a cultivator, then summoned a dark entity, admitting he did not originally want to use it because the price was high. The demonic creature lunged at Yimo, unleashing devastating dark power. The defeated bodyguard was consumed by a purple shadow rising from the ground, his body twisting in agony. Yimo, surprised, realized the technique seemed to have a teleportation function and wondered if it was a cultivation method of this world. Sun Seoven coldly declared that since his trash guards were useless, they would become part of him, because the shadow art only required devouring a cultivator. Laughing maniacally, he boasted that he had absorbed two cultivators at once. In a flash of purple light, the guard's life energy was ripped from his body. Empowered, Sun Xian proclaimed he had reached the legendary first cultivation level. Yimo stared in shock, realizing his opponent had just devoured two people's cultivation bases. In the center of the darkness, a mysterious eye-shaped artifact pulsed with sinister energy as Sonobin, wrapped in shadow power, warned Yimo with a crazed smile that he was next. Meanwhile, Ninyu blamed herself for her arrogance, regretting that she had not foreseen how deeply Sonobin had hidden his power. She stepped forward, believing Yimo was in danger because of her, and shouted at Sun Shan to let him go, offering to settle matters between themselves. Sun Seoven looked at her with contempt, mocking that even now she was still protecting that trash, surrounded by shadow energy. He called Yimo by name and unleashed his dark entity again. Desperate, Ninyu screamed for Yimo to dodge. Suddenly, a barrage of dark projectiles intercepted the attack, stopping it mid-air. Yimo appeared instantly in front of Ninxing's to protect her, slamming his foot down to release a blue spiritual shockwave. Grabbing her hand, he leapt away inside a swirling vortex of power to escape danger. Sun Seoven asked in disbelief when Yimo had managed to evade his attack. Wrapped in his aura, Yimo mocked his so-called first cultivation level and sarcastically asked if that power was really impressive. Ninyu realized in horror that Yimo's aura far surpassed Sun Seoven's. Landing with explosive force, Yimo charged forward and delivered a devastating punch that sent Sun Seoven flying, coughing up dark blood. In disbelief, Sun Sha cried, "How is this possible?" The shadow entity attacked again to protect its master, but Yimo calmly deflected the purple energy wave with his blue aura like an impenetrable shield. Sun Seoven sneered that even if Yimo were a second-level cultivator, he would still be devoured. By his shadow art, Yimo allowed the dark tentacles to wrap around him, then suddenly exploded with spiritual power, shattering the purple energy. With red glowing eyes, he declared coldly that against true absolute power, the so-called shadow art was useless. His energy tore the demonic manifestation into thousands of fragments. Emerging from the wreckage, Yimo smiled confidently and announced that he had caught the real source of Sunshan's power, a small, slimy purple creature holding a squealing insect. Yimo revealed that the shadow art was actually a parasitic spiritual insect that absorbed human spiritual energy. With contempt, he crushed it in his hand, destroying his enemy's power source. Completely defeated, Sun Sha collapsed to his knees, spitting dark blood. Lying on the ground, he wondered why Yimo, supposedly a discarded family trash, could be so strong. In panic, he shouted that Yimo could not kill him because he belonged to the Sony family, whose great-grandfather was part of the true hidden sects. He threatened that if Yimo killed him, he would surely die in return. Yimo pondered the term hidden sect, wondering if it referred to the cultivation sects of this world. Sun Seoven burst into maniacal laughter, shouting that compared to his powerful background, Yimo was nothing. Calmly, Yimo began walking toward him, his blue aura burning with terrifying determination. Fear overtook Sonobin as he warned Yimo to think carefully, insisting that he could not afford the consequences of killing him. Yet Yimo continued advancing, each step echoing with unshakable resolve. As Sun Seoven began crawling on the ground, dragged across the ground, Sun Shan desperately orders Yimo to stop and asked in panic why he keeps advancing. As Yimo's hand descends, Sun Shan begs him to spare his life, swearing that he is not joking and that Yimo will truly die if he kills him. Terrified, he admits he was wrong and pleads to be let go. But with his eyes burning red, Yimo coldly condemns him to rest in hell. Without hesitation, he releases a devastating strike that shatters the ground beneath his opponent. Freed from her restraints, Ninyu watches the scene in stunned silence, unable to speak. Yumo stands tall and imposing over Sun Shaon's defeated body, his blue aura still crackling with power. As the dust settles, the destruction of the temple, courtyard, and the end of the battle are fully revealed. Turning around, Yumo tells Ning Qingzu that everything is over and informs her that he has received news that her aunt has already been picked up. With a trembling voice, she thanks him, admitting that she always thought he was just an ordinary person and never expected anything like this. Looking regretful, she realizes to herself that in the end, she was the ignorant one, sitting atop the ruins. Yumo explains that he would have sought out Sansavan anyway and that, in addition, he has obtained what he wanted. Holding up a golden artifact, he deduces that it must be Sansavan's spiritual treasure. He notes that although its craftsmanship is rough, it is still an object that only a 4th stage cultivator could produce. Beside him, Ning asks why, with such overwhelming power, he was expelled by the Wei family, arguing that he clearly could have become the head of the clan. Turning his back to her, Yumo replies coldly that he no longer has anything to do with the Wei family, adding that his true strength will only emerge after the qualitative transformation of the 3rd stage. Hearing this, fierce determination ignites in Qingzu, who silently vows that she must reach that level no matter the cost. A painful memory surfaces. Her desire to become a true cultivator is rooted in escaping the oppressive control of the Nin family. Yumo watches her quietly for a moment, understanding her inner struggle without saying a word. Breaking the silence, he reminds her of their deal and says he will help resolve the problem in her body while showing her a shining pill. He explains that it is the spirit dispersing pill, designed to dissolve the violent spiritual energy afflicting her. Horrified, she asked whether dispersing it would mean her cultivation base would disappear completely. Calmly, Yumo warns that the ancient method she practices is flawed and that if she continues, she will die prematurely. She hesitates, saying that if she disperses her power, she will be an ordinary person for the rest of her life. Yumo tells her this is their next deal, leaving her completely shocked. With a penetrating gaze and red glowing eyes, he asks her directly whether she wants to learn the true immortal cultivation method. Days later, under a bright sunny sky, the doorbell rings at Yemo's luxurious house. He cautiously opens the door, wondering who could be visiting him. To his surprise, he sees a blushing Ning Qingzu, elegantly dressed with her luggage in hand. Nervously, she explains that according to their agreement, she has brought her belongings and will stay at his house temporarily. Confused by her red face, Yumo asks whether her injury has reopened. Embarrassed, she gently pushes past him and stammers for him not to mention it. As they walk through the garden, she asks whether he is going on a long journey. He replies that he is, though he does not know when he will return. Inwardly, Yumo thinks that with the Sansavan matter resolved, he should go to Liushi to search for clues about the spiritual source. Pointing to the silver heartgrass, he explains that cultivating near it will benefit her, as the spiritual energy it emits is gentle and ideal for healing her body. Nearby, his little puppy happily runs around, drawn to the plant's energy. Stroking the dog, Yumo confirms that before leaving, he will teach her the true immortal cultivation method as part of their deal. Then, with a sly smile, he asks her to take responsibility for caring for both the silver heartgrass and his dog while he is away. Surprised, she comments that it is strange to see such an expression on his face. Holding the puppy, she asks what its name is. Yumo hesitates, wondering if she means a person. Smiling, she asks whether it has no name yet and urges him to choose one, so it will be remembered by the world. As the puppy barks curiously, Yumo gazes nostalgically and decides to name it Salyu. The puppy barks happily, and she smiles, saying it seems to like its new name. Yumo murmurs softly that this is good. A memory from his past suddenly flashes in his mind, a familiar voice calling Salyu to come eat. His companions praising brother Salyu for his cool techniques, and the image of his traitorous master affectionately calling him little Salyu. The painful echo fades as steam clears and Yumo returns to reality in his bathroom. Ninyu emerges, drying her hair, slightly blushing as she asks which room she will sleep in. Later, in the study, she asks how he plans to deal with the Sun family. Checking his phone, Yumo casually replies that everything has been arranged. Without looking up, he tells her she can sleep in the guest room, which he has already cleaned. With a sinister smile and glowing red eyes, he reveals that in the eyes of the world, Sun Shawan will not disappear. Meanwhile, on the back mountain of the Sun family, an imposter identical to Sun Seovan meets with the clan members, perfectly executing Yemo's plan. An elder addresses him as Seovan, the head of the Sun family. Sun Miao asks whether he is certain that his great-grandfather will come out of seclusion today. Sweating nervously, the fake Seovan says that is what his information indicates. Suddenly, a massive stone gate begins to open, releasing brilliant light from within. The imposter exclaims in shock that the door is opening as everyone watches in anticipation. A gigantic claw emerges from the darkness. Bowing, he announces that his great-grandfather has emerged. Miao reflects that 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. For time flows differently for immortal cultivators. He congratulates the elder for reaching the third cultivation stage, declaring him a legendary immortal and wishing him a life as long as the heavens. The great-grandfather of the Sun family appears riding atop a dark beast, laughing heartily. He thanks everyone for waiting so early in the morning and tells his nephew that his tongue is still as sharp as ever. The patriarch then calls the fake Seoven forward. After a formal greeting, he asks what happened with the boy from the Y family. Trembling, the imposter says that the matter has been dropped because Imo is ultimately just an ordinary person and not worth pursuing. The word dropped echoes, and his face drains of color. With red glowing eyes, the elder rebukes him harshly, asking how he dares use such a word as a member of the Sun family. He warns that just because he indulges him does not mean he will not discard him, and if he cannot handle the matter, his great-grandfather will do it himself. Calling to men forward, Yu and Kanan, shipping from the hidden sect, the elder orders them to make a trip to Nai. The fake Seoven panics internally, realizing this is disastrous. With absolute coldness, the patriarch commands them to bring back that boy's head. Ning Kingzu stared at Imo in disbelief and exclaimed, "You get up at 5 in the morning, just to train, even when I go to the spa. I don't wake up this early." Hearing her complaint, Imo calmly replied, "Spiritual energy peaks at 5 a.m. at that time. You get twice the results with half the effort. Drink this before we start." Without hesitating much, Ning Kingzu took the drink Imo handed to her and gulped it down immediately. As the liquid flowed through her, she could faintly feel a trace of spiritual energy entering her body. Surprised, she looked at him and asked, "What is it?" Imo answered evenly, "A simplified version of the gathering spirit pill. Your body needs gentle spiritual energy right now. The original pill would be destimulating. This one is made by mixing powdered fragments of the pill into celery and cucumber juice. That mild blend suits your body perfectly for now." In his heart, he silently reflected. On the Luyu continent, this is considered food therapy. Even infants use it. The bodies of people in this world really are fragile. Then he looked at her again and said firmly, "Now hurry and get changed. I'll teach you real cultivation." His eyes were filled with determination, completely serious about guiding her properly. The scene shifted to the garden outside. Early morning light filtered through the trees as Ning Kingzu ran along the path, slightly out of breath. "We're really doing this here?" she asked, glancing around at the open space. Imo, already seated calmly, instructed her. "Nature is full of ambient energy. This spot is perfect." Not far away, a few elderly onlookers watched the two of them with curiosity. One of them muttered, at his age, "What's he even doing? Sitting there to meditate?" Another chuckled and added, "This is what they call a love that risks your life. A couple that can handle a girl's whims is sure to last long." Hearing their teasing remarks, Ning Kingzu's cheeks flushed red. Embarrassed and flustered, she protested, "Which part of this looks like a couple to you?" Watching her restless expression, Imo said calmly, "Calm yourself, try to feel the energy around you." Ning Kingzu slowly opened her eyes, still confused, her breathing uneven. Imo continued patiently, "Before, you were forcing all the spiritual energy into your body. That's why it mixed with rough, chaotic energy. That energy is invisible to normal humans, but it's the body's ultimate defense. You destroyed that barrier yourself." His voice remained steady as he explained further. Cultivation is about purifying energy. Pure, gentle spiritual energy strengthens the body from within. The biggest difference between you and me is how we use that energy. You people can channel only about 40% of it. My method uses 100%. As he spoke, spiritual energy began to release from Yemo's body. A subtle yet powerful aura surrounded him, and the energy flowed smoothly, gathering and being absorbed back into him in a steady rhythm. Continuing his lesson, he said, "Absorbing energy requires mental focus. Normally, that focus exists in the spirit platform around the forehead. Once you find it, just absorb, focus, feel it, absorb." Following his guidance, Ning Kingzu gradually entered a strange state of awareness. Her surroundings seemed distant as she tried to empty her thoughts. "Perceive, empty your mind, become one with nothing," she told herself. Yet frustration crept in. "Why? I still can't feel the aura." The elderly couple who had been watching them for a long time began to grow concerned. "Are you all right? You're sweating like a waterfall," one of them called out. Meanwhile, Ning Kingzu continued meditating, though it was clearly difficult for her. "No good. I really don't get it," she thought anxiously. Then suddenly something changed. A warm current began to flow inside her body. Spiritual energy started entering her system naturally, gently circulating within her. A hand rested lightly on the top of her head. It was Yimo. He had stepped closer without her noticing, leaning slightly toward her. His voice, low but firm, he said, "Close your eyes and try again." Yimo continued in a steady voice, "Use my spiritual power as a guide, try feeling it through me." Hearing that, Ning Kingzu's cheeks turned red, but she nodded softly. "Oh, okay." Not far away, the elderly couple watching them widened their eyes in shock. "Oh my God," one whispered dramatically. In their minds, this wasn't training at all, it was pure romance unfolding in broad daylight. The scene shifted to Ning Kingzu's consciousness. She found herself surrounded by endless water, calm and luminous, stretching in every direction. The world felt quiet, weightless. Slowly, faint currents began to flow around her, subtle ripples responding to her thoughts. So this is spiritual energy felt through willpower. She murmured in awe. It's beautiful. Within that serene inner world, she could also see Yemo's presence calm and composed, like a steady anchor in the vast ocean. He spoke gently. That's the true essence of this world's aura. It's too thin to be seen by the naked eye. After a moment, his tone shifted slightly, practical as ever. All right, that's enough for today. If you keep sensing and drawing an energy like this, you'll reach cultivation stage 1. Back in reality, Ning Qingzu slowly opened her eyes. Her face was still flushed, whether from embarrassment or the closeness between them. Even she couldn't tell. At the same time, exhaustion washed over her body. Though she had only been sitting still, the mental strain had drained nearly all her strength. Yimo glanced at her and said calmly, "Let's head back." Ning Qingzu nodded lightly. All right. Later, she was sitting downstairs by herself, lost in thought. Suddenly, she clenched her fist and burst out honestly. Her face flushed again as Yemo's words replayed in her mind. Then her expression hardened with determination. The goal is stage 1 cultivation. I have to keep at it. With that resolve burning inside her, the scene shifted forward 1 week later. Yemo was standing alone at a bus stop outside the city. Looking around quietly, he muttered, "This is the place Ryuya mentioned. Did I get here too early?" Just before leaving home earlier that day, he had been thinking to himself, "It's been a week. Amatani should now be able to sense spiritual energy clearly. With the gathering spirit pill I gave her, she should be able to reach stage 1. With her talent, I can trust her to handle things while I'm away." His thoughts paused as he turned to the side. A vehicle was approaching from a distance. That must be Ryuya's car. The bus pulled to a stop in front of him. Without hesitation, Yemo stepped inside. The driver looked at him curiously and said, "Hey, kid headed somewhere dangerous. We're not busy today. Sit wherever you like." The driver's expression seemed oddly different, almost unreadable. Yemo walked further inside the bus, deep in thought, his mind already preparing for whatever awaited him next. Inside the bus, Yemo glanced around and noticed several unfamiliar faces. Without drawing attention to himself, he walked quietly to his seat and sat down. Closing his eyes for a brief moment, he thought to himself, finally, it's time. The bus began moving forward, carrying him farther from everything familiar. The scene shifted to a flight landing, and a voice announcement echoed in the background. We've arrived in Nemi City. Not far away, two people were talking as they stepped out. Finally here, one of them said with relief. The other stretched stiffly and complained, "Ugh, getting old is rough, sitting too long wears me out." Meanwhile, a man stood slightly apart from the crowd, staring at his phone. On the screen was a photo of Yemo and Ning Qingzu together. His eyes narrowed as a cold smile formed on his lips. "I've already got that brat's address. Time to strike when the chance comes." His expression grew darker, almost twisted with excitement. 30 years since I last went out into the world. Time to enjoy myself to the fullest. The scene shifted once more to the next morning. Inside Su Jingwen's office, everything looked orderly and professional. Her secretary stood nearby, waiting quietly. But Su Jingwen herself wasn't focused on work. She was staring at a bracelet on her wrist, the one Yemo had given her before leaving. His words echoed in her mind. "While I'm away from Nemi City, wear this bracelet for protection." She gently touched it, her expression unreadable, as if trying to understand the weight behind his calm warning. Lost in her thoughts, Su Jingwen felt her cheeks grow warm. The memory replayed clearly in her mind. Yemo's calm voice explaining the bracelet as he handed it to her. Each bead has a warding sigil engraved in it. If you sense danger, use it just like I showed you. At the time, she had nodded seriously. But now, thinking about the way he had personally prepared it for her heart couldn't help but flutter. Without realizing it, she had completely drifted into her own little world, absent-mindedly staring at her wrist. "President Su." The sudden voice snapped her back to reality. "I've been talking this whole time, but you've been staring at your hand instead." It was just her secretary, looking thoroughly confused. She had clearly been trying to discuss work matters, only to be ignored. The secretary tilted her head slightly and added with a teasing tone, "That bracelet, it's from Mr. Imori, isn't it? You must really like it." Su Jingwen stiffened for a split second, caught off guard. The faint blush on her face only deepened, though she quickly tried to compose herself and return to her usual calm, professional demeanor. Hearing her secretary's teasing remark, Su Jingwen immediately straightened her posture and shot her a sharp look. "Careful, Ogata. Maybe I'll send you on the next business trip to country Y, your least favorite place." The threat was delivered in a calm, almost elegant tone. From outside the office, a panicked voice suddenly rang out. "Please don't do that." It was the manager, who had apparently overheard enough to understand the danger Ogata was. The scene then shifted to a dense forest, where Yemo's bus was steadily moving along a long, winding road. The sunlight filtered faintly through the trees, casting shadows across the windows. Yemo sat quietly in his seat, his expression calm but alert. In his mind, he calculated 6 hours since departure. His gaze drifted briefly across the passengers. It seems everyone on this bus has their own reason for heading to Ryuya. The air inside the bus felt strangely tense, as if each traveler carried hidden intentions. Suddenly, without warning, the bus came to an abrupt stop. The force jolted everyone forward. What the? Someone shouted from the back. Can't even ride in peace, huh? Another passenger complained loudly, irritation spreading through the cabin as confusion filled the air. The driver quickly tried to steady the situation, raising his voice so everyone could hear. Please remain calm. This bus is completely safe. But before he could finish, the sound of splintering metal echoed through the air. The door was violently kicked open from the outside. A man stepped in, and he wasn't alone. 3 more followed behind him, all carrying weapons. Their presence instantly froze the atmosphere inside the bus. As one of the armed men tried to push his way further in, a passenger near the front stood up to block him. For a brief moment, it seemed like he might resist, but then a suffocating wave of killing intent poured out from the intruder's body. The sheer pressure of it stunned everyone present. It was so intense that the air itself felt heavy. Another passenger, recognizing something, spoke up nervously. You guys, you're Flower Pavilion's men, right? I thought this was Kamakochi's job. The words had barely left his mouth when one of the gang members moved. In a single, ruthless motion, he thrust his weapon straight through the man's throat. The attack was swift and merciless. Chaos and screams erupted inside the bus. Every passenger was overwhelmed with fear. Their earlier complaints instantly replaced with terror. No one dared to move. The gang member who had carried out the attack slowly scanned the cabin, his eyes cold and merciless. The killing intent radiating from him grew even stronger as he spoke. Everyone off the bus. There's someone on board who shouldn't be here. He tightened his grip on his weapon and added harshly. We'll question you all outside. Otherwise ... you'll end up like him. Yumo quietly lifted his gaze toward them, his expression unchanged. Inside his mind, he thought calmly. So that's who they're after? Looks like I've gotten dragged into another mess. One of the gang members suddenly pointed at him. Hey, kid, stand up. Yumo didn't respond. He remained seated, silent and still. The man's voice grew harsher. Sneaking around like that. Show me what's in your bag. At that moment, the gang's leader shifted his attention toward the scene. His eyes were cold as he spoke to his subordinate. Kato, ignore the uncooperative ones. No time to waste, just deal with him quickly. Roger that. Kato stepped forward, fixing his gaze on Yumo. A powerful killing intent began to radiate from him, thick and oppressive, pressing down on the already terrified passengers. The air felt heavier with each step he took toward Yumo. His weapon ready, his hostility unmistakable. What? He vanished. The man's voice trembled in disbelief. He couldn't understand what had just happened. 1 second Yumo had been sitting quietly in his seat, and the next, he was gone. The gang member stood there completely stunned. Then suddenly Yumo appeared right behind him. Before the man could react, block, or even turn around, Yumo's fist shot forward. The punch landed directly on his face with overwhelming force. The impact sent him flying backward, crashing through one of the bus windows and hurtling outside. Glass shattered everywhere. After delivering the blow, Yumo spoke coldly. If you're in such a hurry, I'll take you all on myself. Seeing this, the boss and the remaining gang member immediately rushed forward with their weapons, fury blazing in their eyes. Damn it, get him, they shouted. One of them charged at Yumo from the front and threw a punch toward his face. At the same time, another attacked from behind, trying to catch him off guard. But Yumo moved smoothly, blocking the strike with effortless precision. The boss himself lunged in next, weapon raised, aiming to finish the fight personally. It ended in an instant. With a single punch, Yumo knocked him down. The force of the blow drove the boss upward, slamming his head into the ceiling of the bus. The metal above dented violently from the impact. Yumo's eyes had turned red, glowing faintly with an intense aura as he looked over the defeated men. That's the last of... Among the shaken passengers was the hooded girl they had seen earlier, silently watching everything unfold. Soon, the chaos settled. The gang members were thrown off the bus, their bodies dragged outside, including the one who had been killed earlier. One of the passengers inspected the vehicle carefully and said grimly, "The axle's busted, we can't move." Hearing this, a bald man clicked his tongue in frustration. TCH, of all places for this to happen. No signal either. If wild beasts show up in this forest, we're trapped. 2 other passengers exchanged uneasy glances. What do? We don't even know what's nearby. The forest around them felt vast and silent, and the tension that had briefly faded began creeping back once more. Yumo stood slightly apart from the others, leaning calmly against a tree as the anxious voices filled the clearing. His expression remained steady while his thoughts moved ahead of the situation. With my power, I can make it out of this forest. His eyes shifted toward the deeper path ahead. But if I'm heading to Ria, I'll need a new contact to guide me there. Just then, a voice called out to him. It was the hooded girl, the same one whose life had indirectly been saved because of his intervention on the bus. She stepped forward, determination in her eyes. If it's Ria you're going to, I can take you there, she said firmly. In return, take me safely to Gamoto. Yumo glanced at her briefly, unimpressed, not interested. Without waiting for her reaction, he began walking away. Wait, she shouted, her voice rising. Think about it. Without me, you'll never reach Ryuya. He didn't stop. Calmly, almost dismissively, he replied, those men earlier, they were targeting you. Probably after that box you're carrying. His gaze flickered toward the object she was holding. Besides, you've got some nerve trying to bargain with me. As he spoke, a subtle wave of energy began to radiate from him again. The pressure in the air shifted, heavy and undeniable. The girl stiffened. For a moment, she clenched her teeth. Then she exhaled sharply. Fine. You win. But she wasn't done. Wait, she called again, this time more composed. My name's Fuyuki Kui. I'm from Ryuya. She studied his expression carefully before asking. You're not going there for money, right? Slowly, she lowered her hood, revealing her face clearly for the first time. There was sharp intelligence in her eyes now, no longer just desperation. Then she held up something for him to see. You're going to look for this, aren't you? Just then, a shower of jeeps suddenly starts flying toward the group. One of the men looks around in alarm and shouts, someone's here. Another quickly follows with a relieved cry. Thank goodness. We're saved. At the same time, several vehicles pull up and come to a halt right beside their bus. The sudden arrival fills the air with tension and hope. One of the men rushes toward the vehicles and calls out loudly, are you the rescue team sent by Kamakochi-san? But before he can get any response, a man steps forward and delivers a powerful kick that sends him crashing backward onto the ground. The atmosphere instantly shifts from relief to dread. A figure slowly steps out of one of the cars and says coldly, Kamakochi-san, as if he'd ever send help. We then see a few guards dragging someone forward while shouting, Hanadate-san, we found Tabita. They are talking about the same gangster we saw earlier. The man looks beaten and barely able to stand, as he is forced to face the young master. He lowers his head and apologizes weakly, Hanadate-san, I'm sorry. Seeing his miserable condition, the young master, Hanadate-san, asks sharply, where did that woman go? The gangster bows his head even further and answers in a shaken voice, all of our men were taken out by a single punk. After hearing those words, Hanadate-san's expression turns ice cold. In a low, threatening voice, he repeats, a single punk. You do know what happens if you lie to me, don't you? The air grows heavy with fear as his warning hangs over everyone present. Just then, a bald man hurriedly steps forward and says, Hanadate-san, I know where those two ran off to. If you get us out of this forest, I'll tell you. From inside the bus, a few other members lean forward and back him up, shouting, that's right, we can vouch for it. He had a mask on, but that smell was definitely a woman. Hearing this, Hanadate-san narrows his eyes slightly and replies, oh, go on. The bald man gathers his courage and points toward a darker stretch of trees. They went from here into that part of the forest over there. A beast might have already eaten them by now. One of the young master's guards then steps closer and says carefully, that way leads to Gamoto. Maybe they went to Kunita Shiguru. At this, Hanadate-san lets out a faint scoff. HMPH. They think they're safe just because they used a Ryoya car. We're going to Gamoto too. The bald man immediately begins shouting at him, desperation clear in his voice. Let us out of here as well. We told you what we knew, just like we promised. Hanadate-san slowly turns around and looks at his guards without saying a word. In response, all of them begin advancing toward the remaining people. The group's condition worsens instantly. Panic spreads across their faces. Someone cries out, what are you planning to do with us? The bald man is trembling so badly he can barely stand. His voice cracks as he shouts, I said we already gave you the information. After that, the only thing we hear is the sound of desperate screams echoing through the forest. The cries grow louder for a moment, and then the scene abruptly shifts. Now we are shown Gamoto. The atmosphere is calmer, almost deceptively peaceful. We see Imo and Fuyuchan walking down a street together. As they move through the town, Fuyuchan speaks in a serious tone, her expression firm. Listen, don't use your power unless you absolutely have to. Hanadate will come to Gamoto sooner or later. So, we need to avoid standing out. And if you use your power, people might figure out who you really are. If they realize you know the secret of the divine water, a lot of people will come after you. Imo nods slightly and replies, I understand. Just then, Fuyuchan looks ahead and says, look, that's the person I mentioned. In front of them, they see a man standing with his dog, gently patting it as he speaks softly. Oh, Chio, you've had a rough time lately, haven't you? This man is Kunita-san. Hearing footsteps, he turns toward them and smiles faintly. Oh, Fuyuchan, it's you. Fuyuchan steps forward without hesitation and says politely but urgently, I'd like you to guide my friend to Rairia as quickly as possible if you can. After hearing her request, Kunita-san nods calmly. I just arranged a car leaving for Rairia today. You two can ride along. Fuyuchan then glances at Imo and explains. Kunita-san is well connected in Ryoya and knows the safe routes. He and Yumi-san once helped rescue people from Rairia, so his reputation is solid. Fuyuchan's expression darkens, and in a quiet, saddened voice she says, but Yumi-san has been in the hospital these last few years. The weight of her words lingers in the air. Kunita-san gently replies, trying to shift the mood. Anyway, wait inside the shop for now. But before they can move, a loud voice calls out from behind. Yo, Cunita, business looks good, huh? A yellow-haired boy approaches, a sly grin on his face. He doesn't come alone, several rough-looking men follow behind him, quickly drawing a crowd around the area. The yellow-haired boy continues mockingly. You'll be paying back that gambling debt soon, right? Otherwise, we're taking the car you put up as collateral. The atmosphere instantly turns tense. Everyone's expressions change. Yumo watches silently and thinks to himself, "The collectors, huh? What a pain." Cunita-san looks at the yellow-haired boy and says firmly, "Yamai, I'm busy today. Come back later." But Yamai's tone turns cold and unforgiving. "If you can't pay today, you're out of chances." Fuyuchan frowns in confusion and whispers, "Cunita-san hates gambling. Why would he put his car up as collateral?" Cunita-san, unable to hold back any longer, confronts Yamai angrily. "You tricked me when I was desperate and stuck me with a loan shark. And now you've got the nerve to stroll in here like nothing happened." Hearing this, the yellow-haired boy smiles even wider. "Tricked? That sounds so ugly. We signed a proper contract, remember? You borrowed 10 million mon from the gambling hall to treat the one you love, didn't you?" Cunita-san's hands tremble with anger, his face burning with humiliation and frustration. Meanwhile, Fuyuchan's thoughts race anxiously. Without Cunita-san's car, we can't get to Rairia, and Minamino-san is waiting. If we don't hurry, Hanadate's group will show up here too. In the middle of that tense standoff, Fuyuchan suddenly steps forward, her voice steady despite the pressure. "I'll cover Cunita-san's debt." The old man looks at her in shock. "Fuyuchan, you don't have to." But she cuts him off firmly. "You can get the money later. Just hurry and get the car ready." At her words, the yellow-haired boy snaps his fingers. One of his men immediately brings over a set of documents. With a satisfied grin, he says, "Fine by me." Cunita borrowed 10 million mon with the car as collateral. He continues casually, as if discussing something trivial. "The interest is 10% on day 1, 20% on day 2, and it keeps rising like that from day 3 on." Then, smiling even wider, he adds, "It's been 15 days since he borrowed it his. Total debt now is 130 million yen. Cunita-san's face flushes with disbelief and anger. "I never agreed to those terms." Fuyuchan steps forward again, glaring at them. "You're just trying to bleed him dry." The yellow-haired boy begins clapping mockingly. "I don't care if he can't pay. We'll just settle things the Gamoto way. Around here, everything's decided by gambling debts. Lives, everything disappears if you win." He tilts his head slightly, his smile turning sharper. "So how about we let the dice decide this one too?" From behind him, a tall figure steps forward. Pointing toward him, the yellow-haired boy announces, "Our friend William here will act as the dealer." The butler-like man gives a deep, graceful bow, a strangely unsettling smile on his face. "A pleasure to meet you. It's an honor." Seeing all of this unfold, Cunita-san raises his voice in panic. "Fuyuchan, don't take this seriously. He's one of the most powerful men in the whole gambling hall." But Fuyuchan is already sweating. The pressure is intense, yet she doesn't step back. The yellow-haired boy casually places a hand on his butler's shoulder and says, with a sly grin, "If you win, the debt's wiped out, but if you lose, it doubles." Then he leans forward slightly, giving her a disturbingly creepy look. "You still want to do this?" Watching the situation carefully, Yumo thinks to himself, "I can't let them touch anyone, and we have to keep the car. It's like they've taken us hostage. I'm sure they set this all up from the start. It's a trap. When you bet on dice, the key to winning is listening carefully to the sound. When I was little, I trained my hearing using dice." Fuyuchan, clenching her fist, says firmly, "If I win, his debt is cleared, right?" In her mind, she calculates the odds. "In this gamble, I should have an overwhelming advantage." The old man tries once more to stop her, but the yellow-haired boy interrupts smoothly. "Of course, I never go back on my word." With that, both sides take their seats at the table. On one side sit Fuyuchan, Cunita-san, and Yimo. On the other side are the yellow-haired boy, his eerie butler William, and their men. The air grows heavy as the dice are placed on the table. And now, the game is about to begin. After that, everyone finishes getting ready and looks toward them. Seeing this, Yimo thinks to himself, Fuyuchan is already walking right into their trap. He's not just some gambling prodigy. At the same time, on the other side, the butler is also thinking to himself, to think he actually agreed to this bet, he must have a death wish. I've been training in gambling skills under my master since I was 5 years old. With this ability, I can dominate any gambling hall. And with this button my master gave me, as long as I have this, winning at dice is guaranteed. Soon after, we see Fuyuchan preparing to roll the dice. Meanwhile, the butler stands there with an extremely creepy smile on his face, thinking to himself, a piece of cake. Then he calmly says, "Ladies first, please choose odd or even." Some of the other people standing with him also speak up, saying, "You roll the dice yourself, so no complaining if you lose, alright?" However, completely ignoring their remarks, Fuyuchan confidently replies, "It's too soon to laugh at us." Then she begins thinking to herself, with 3 dice, the chance of getting odd or even is 50-50 each. Mathematically, it looks like a fair game. But from that very first throw, I already memorized the sound of the dice landing. This round is mine. Immediately after, she declares loudly, this one is even. Hearing her confidence, the butler responds, you sound confident. Then I'll take odd. Open it. When the dice are revealed, the butler looks at them and says, 2, 3, and 5. That makes 10. So it's even. Seeing the result, Fuyuchan lets out a relieved breath and says, thank goodness. Kunita-san then excitedly adds, that's one win. One more, and we've won it all. Hearing that, Fuyuchan nods and replies, right? But the two men standing behind the butler immediately interrupt with cold expressions, saying, don't get carried away. The game isn't over yet. Then the butler calmly looks at Fuyuchan again and says, then please throw the dice again. After that, Fuyuchan starts rolling the dice again. As she prepares for the next round, she looks at them firmly and says, you'd better keep your promise, or I won't let you off easy. Then she confidently declares, I'm choosing on next. Hearing her decision, the butler calmly replies, in that case, I'll go with. At that moment, the scene briefly shifts to Imo, who watches the situation carefully while thinking to himself, here it comes. Meanwhile, the butler finishes his sentence with a faint smile and says, how about triples? The moment those words are spoken, Kunita-san is shocked and thinks to himself, triples. The chance that all three dice match is 1 in 36. Fuyuchan immediately responds, that's right. She is just about to reveal the dice, confidently believing the outcome is already decided, and says, which means this round is as good as ours. However, the butler continues to stand there with the same unsettling smile on his face. When the dice are finally shown, he calmly announces the result. 3 sixes, a perfect triple. Seeing that unbelievable outcome, Kunita-san can hardly believe his eyes and says, I can't believe she actually hit it. At the same time, Fuyuchan is completely stunned and thinks to herself, no way. Did I mishear the sound? Imo, who seems to understand what is really happening here, quietly watches everything unfold, but he chooses not to say anything. Then the butler casually speaks again. Let's keep going just one more round. Fuyuchan immediately responds with determination. I won't get it wrong this time. After saying that, she begins shaking the dice once again and rolls them. While concentrating on the sound, she thinks to herself, it should be odd, right? This time, she chooses odd. Meanwhile, the two men standing behind the butler start whispering among themselves again, saying, she's shaking now, and this one's a loss for sure. William never loses at dice. Hearing them, the butler quietly smiles to himself and thinks, these fools don't understand. Gambling is my sanctum. Then he raises his voice and calmly announces, then I'll choose even. Fuyuchan is startled by his choice and begins doubting herself again. Even? Did I mishear again? She thinks nervously. After a brief moment of hesitation, she says, I'll open it. But just as she is about to reveal the dice, someone suddenly stops her. That person is none other than Imo. Seeing him step forward, one of the men immediately snaps. Who the hell are you? The butler also looks at him with curiosity and asks, and you are? Imo calmly steps forward and declares, I'll take the last round. Hearing what he said, the butler looks at him in surprise and says, you? Seeing Imo suddenly step forward like that, Fuyuchan immediately reacts and says, he's not a normal person. Imo calmly looks toward the butler and replies, no, he's the same as me. Confused by his words, Fuyuchan asks, the same as you? At the same time, a thought begins to form in her mind. Don't tell me, this guy is. Meanwhile, on the other side, an intense and terrifying aura begins to emanate from the butler's body. The pressure in the air grows heavier as he stares directly at Imo, thinking to himself, a cultivator. Just then, someone suddenly slams a hand down onto the table and shouts, hey, are you planning to swap in on your own? The person causing the commotion is none other than the yellow-haired guy, who angrily yells, weren't you only supposed to be betting against that woman? Without showing the slightest bit of hesitation, Imo calmly pulls out a card. He flicks it forward, letting it land on the table in front of them. Then he says in a steady voice, this card has 20 million yen on it. You can withdraw it from any bank. Then, he continues speaking in a calm, but firm voice. If it's money you want, win and it's yours too. Seeing this bold move, the yellow-haired man bursts into a sinister laugh and says, upping the stakes, huh? Interesting. He immediately leans back and sits down in his chair again, clearly amused by the situation. With a greedy smile, he says, fine. I'm not stupid enough to turn down cash. Then he looks directly at Imo and lays out the conditions. If you win, his debt is wiped out. But if you lose, it doubles and this money becomes mine. After that, the remaining player, the butler, calmly speaks as well. I'll stick with even. Same as before. He then looks straight at Imo and asks, what about you? Hearing everything that has been said, Imo slowly raises his head. His eyes glow with a faint red light as he answers without hesitation, triples. Triples. Immediately, one of the men standing behind the butler scoffs and says mockingly, copying my call. That's lame as hell. He continues with confidence, and on odd triples. No way that's happening. Hearing Yemo's choice, Kunita-san becomes worried and says, hey, you sure about this? He quickly adds, Triples are rare enough, and you're limiting it to odd. Fu Yuchen also tries to reason with him and asks with concern, "Are you really okay with that?" Meanwhile, the butler quietly watches Yimo, his expression calm but observant. Then he confirms once more, "Odd triples, right?" Hearing the butler's confirmation, Yimo calmly replies, "Of course." Then he adds, "Mind if I open it?" At that moment, the butler is secretly activating the button he possesses. A faint but powerful energy begins to radiate from his body as he says with quiet confidence, "Go ahead." Inside his mind, however, he is thinking something entirely different. With this button, all I have to do is focus on an object, and I can move anything within that range. Changing the dice faces is easy. Switching the dice to any number is child's play. Hey, that money's as good as mine. As these thoughts run through his head, a twisted grin spreads across his face, and he even begins laughing like a madman, convinced that victory is already guaranteed. Just then, Yimo calmly says, "Open it." The dice are revealed. Yimo looks at them and announces clearly, 3 ones. Odd triples. The moment the result is seen, the 2 men standing behind the butler react in shock. One of them blurts out, "Lucky." "No, this has to be cheating." The butler himself is completely stunned. Staring at the dice in disbelief, he shouts, "How did it land on that?" Unable to control his shock any longer, he suddenly stands up from his chair and begins yelling loudly, "Odd triples shouldn't happen like that." Then, pointing angrily toward the table, he shouts, "This is cheating." After hearing all of his accusations, Fu Yuchan finally loses her patience. She shouts angrily, "So your triples are fine, but ours are cheating." The butler, still refusing to accept the outcome, angrily snaps back, "As long as I'm here, there's no way you're rolling triples, because I'm the one who..." Before he can finish his sentence, Yimo calmly completes it for him. "Has been changing the dice faces, right?" The words land heavily in the room. Then Yimo continues in a calm but sharp tone, "You've been using that button on your sleeve to control them. Your trick is way too childish." Hearing this, the butler abruptly stands up from his seat, completely shaken, and stammers, "How do you know that?" Meanwhile, the yellow-haired man turns toward the butler in frustration and shouts, "William, weren't you unbeatable at dice?" At the same time, Fu Yuchan points at them and yells furiously, "You're the ones cheating here." But instead of denying it, the butler slowly rolls up his sleeves. A powerful energy begins to surge from his body as he releases it without restraint. With a cold and hostile expression, he says, "So what? Either way, this is where you all lose." Then, using that same energy, he begins manipulating the weapons around him. They lift and move under his control as he launches an attack toward them. With a threatening glare, he declares, "Dice aren't the only thing I can move." His voice grows colder and more dangerous as he continues, "Let me show you what happens when you piss me off." In the next instant, the butler suddenly launches an attack. With a cruel smile on his face, he sends his knives flying straight toward Yimo. It is clear that he had already decided to turn the situation violent, but Yimo remains completely calm, as if he had expected something like this from the very beginning. A moment later, the scene shifts back to the butler, whose expression quickly turns into one of pure shock. Without even moving from his spot, Yimo has already changed the direction of every single knife that was thrown at him. The blades, which were meant to strike him, instantly shift course under his control. Before anyone can even react, Yimo moves forward with incredible speed. In the blink of an eye, he reaches the butler and grabs him, lifting him up into the air with just one hand as if he weighs nothing. Seeing this, the 2 guards standing beside the yellow-haired man panic and shout, "William San!" Holding the butler in the air, Yimo calmly says, "As promised, the debt is cleared, and I'll be taking the IOU." At that moment, an overwhelming and terrifying energy begins to pour out from Yimo's body, filling the entire room with an intense pressure that makes everyone freeze. From behind, the yellow-haired man grits his teeth and angrily shouts, "Damn you!" Meanwhile, the butler struggles weakly and demands, "Hand it over. Now." "I said hand it over." The yellow-haired man looks at him nervously and says, "William, he's..." But before he can finish, the butler glares at him and coldly says, "San Shisan, are you asking to be killed?" Realizing the situation has completely turned against them, the yellow-haired man reluctantly pulls out the paper and hands it over. "Fine." The moment he does, Yimo releases his grip and throws the butler down onto the ground. Then he coldly says, "Take them and get lost." The butler, now in a miserable and battered state, struggles to speak and quietly replies, "Yes, sir." After that, the group begins leaving the place. As she watches them go, Fu Yuchan looks thoughtful and slightly confused. Then she says, "He was terrified. What did you do to him?" Yimo simply responds in a calm tone, "Nothing much." The scene then shifts back to the other side, where those same men have gathered together again. The 2 guards are still talking to the butler, clearly disturbed by what just happened. One of them asks, "William, what's wrong? I've never seen you that scared." The other adds in disbelief, "I still can't believe he took all of us out by himself." Meanwhile, the butler remains silent, but his entire body is still trembling slightly. Inside his mind, his thoughts are racing. That old man, why is he connected to someone that terrifying? In just a split second, He destroyed a button that not even a bomb could break. Let's get out of here fast. I'm never coming back. After that, the scene shifts once again. This time to outside Rairia. Several people are gathered there, preparing for something as they speak among themselves. One of them says urgently, "Hurry and pitch the tents. We're camping here tonight." Another person asks, "Did you confirm the route?" Then we see Hanadate-san, who is calmly eating his steak while listening to the report. At that moment, one of his men approaches him and gives an update. Yes, if they head back to Rairia tomorrow, they'll have to pass through this road. A cold smile appears as the man continues, "Hey, we paid a fortune to hire that guy. Make sure not a single one of them walks away alive." At the same time, a mysterious box is briefly shown nearby. However, whatever is inside it is not revealed to us. After that, Kunita-san looked at the two of them with deep gratitude and said, "Thank you, Mr. Yumori, Fuyu-chan. Without you two, I would have lost everything, my wife, my car, everything." Seeing his polite and heartfelt behavior, Fuyu-chan quickly shook her head and replied, "Not at all. If it weren't for you, Kunita-san, we would have been stranded with nowhere to go." Then she turned toward Yumo and added with a soft smile, "Thank you so much. I almost got dragged into it too." Yumo, staying calm as always, simply responded, "It's fine. We still need a car to get to Rairia." Hearing this, Kunita-san immediately reassured them, saying, "Then don't worry. I've been arranging rides to Rairia on this road for 50 years. I'm always going back and forth, and if I were younger, I'd drive you myself." As he spoke, he started hitting his chest repeatedly with emotion. But Fuyu-chan quickly stepped forward to stop him. Concerned, "Kunita-san, you need to rest." Soon after, the scene shifted to several vehicles preparing to leave, with someone calling out, "All right, we're heading out." Fuyu-chan waved gently as she said, "See you again someday, Kunita-san." Then, we see her and Yimo moving forward together, with one of the vehicles, continuing their journey. As they traveled, Yimo glanced at her and asked, "You're from Rairia, right? Then why leave if people are chasing you?" Fuyu-chan replied calmly but with purpose, "To bring this out in Minamino-san's place. Hanadate's men are after me because of what's inside this." Hearing that, Yimo looked at what she was carrying and asked again, slightly curious, "A suitcase? What's in it?" After that, Fuyu-chan looked at Yimo and said quietly, "Who knows? I only know one thing, I was entrusted with it by a cultivator." As she spoke, their vehicle sped forward along the road, carrying them deeper into the journey. Meanwhile, a cautious voice could be heard saying, "Rei-san, please be careful, there are all kinds of people here." Just looking around, most of them seem like bad news. Rei-san responded with mild curiosity, "Oh, you can tell." The hooded person beside her gave a confident reply, "Of course. I'm the sole successor of Gamoto's Shinryu style. Reading environments and people's hearts is nothing to me." He continued, pointing subtly at the people around them. "Take that guy, he looks honest, but his heart is pitch black. That old man looks like a simple country bumpkin, but he's the type who squeezes money out of others. And that loud woman over there? She's trouble. No talent, no refinement, just a walking disaster." Hearing this, Rei-san seemed uncertain and said, "Chino-san, is that really true? They all just look like normal people." The man quickly responded, trying to reinforce his authority, "If you really want to find a legendary cultivator, you should trust me. After all, the founder of Shinryu was a cultivator from Rairia, and I agreed to introduce you to one." "Because you asked, Rei-san?" He smiled as he said this, appearing reliable on the surface. However, deep inside his mind, his true thoughts were far more calculating. The Ryudo Group is one of the top foundations in the country. Perfect backing from me. As if cultivators really exist. Those three sisters from the Ryudo family are all idiots. A little sweet talk, and they'll cling to me in no time. Then the real money will follow." Completely unaware of his hidden intentions, Rei-san looked at him with sparkling admiration and said, "That's Chino-san for you." But even as he maintained his outward composure, Chino's thoughts shifted again, this time with a hint of unease. The only one that might be a problem is that kid. He's been sitting there with his eyes closed the whole time. Is he with Kunita? I don't like him here. He was clearly referring to Yimo. As his thoughts continued to drift, he smirked inwardly. Some people have all the luck. If I don't get a chance to show off, this trip will be boring." The scene then shifted back to their vehicle, which was steadily moving forward along the road. However, suddenly a large tree blocked their path, forcing the driver to make a sharp turn. Because of this sudden maneuver, the vehicle lost control and crashed straight into another massive tree nearby, causing a small explosion on impact. Inside the vehicle, the passengers were thrown into confusion, shouting in panic, trying to understand what was happening. At the same time, from the other side, a group of armed men began advancing toward the vehicle, holding their weapons as they shouted threateningly, "Everyone out of the vehicle! Move it! Hurry!" Then, the leader of these men stepped forward, and it was none other than Hanadate-san. Standing beside him was the same bandaged man, who spoke with certainty. "This is definitely one of the vehicles, arranged by the Ministry of Defense." Hanadate-san immediately responded, "No mistake about it. The bandaged man looked around with disdain and added, "Nothing but bumpkins out here." Inside his mind, however, frustration lingered. Damn it. He knocked me out before I could see his face. I've got no idea who he is. Just then, an elderly man cautiously approached them, trying to defuse the situation. With a trembling voice, he said, let's just calm down and talk this out. This car was arranged by Kunita-san, and I'm the one in charge. You know Kunita-san, don't you? Attacking us won't benefit you at all." But before he could finish, the injured man suddenly slapped his hand away and shouted angrily, "Who told you to suck up to us, huh? We're here for the passengers. Get them off the bus now." In the very next moment, everything turned horrifying. An attack was launched instantly so fast that no one could react, and the old man's ear was severed. He let out a scream of agony, collapsing as blood flowed, while the man standing behind him panicked and shouted, "They're going to kill us." All of this had been done by Hanade-san. Calm and unfazed, he wiped the blood off his knife and coldly said, "Quit your whining. Talk back again and see what happens." After that, Hanade-san coldly looked at the man and said in a threatening tone, "I'll slit your throat." His voice carried such chilling intent that it silenced the surroundings for a moment. Just then, loud shouting came from behind. A group of men dragged a young girl forward. It was none other than Rei-san. She struggled and shouted at them to stop. But one of the men looked at her with a twisted grin and said, Well, look what we have here. Hey, search them now." As fear took over, Rei-san desperately called out, "Chino-san, help me, please help me." Hearing her plea, the hooded man froze, panic rising inside him. No way. How am I supposed to save anyone from psychos like this? His confidence from before completely shattered as the reality of the situation hit him. Meanwhile, all the passengers were being forced forward under threat. At that moment, Fuyuchen quietly said to Yimo, "They have guns. We can't let them find out who we really are. Even cultivators can't compete with bullets." Yimo observed everything carefully, his thoughts sharp and calm despite the chaos. So the guys from the last car must have tipped them off about our route. Suddenly, an elderly woman stepped forward from the group, unable to stay silent any longer. She shouted angrily, "Grown men going after young women, how pathetic can you get?" At the same time, Rei-san turned again toward the hooded man and said urgently, "Chino-san, if you're a descendant of a cultivator, you can fight them, right? You promised my father you'd protect me in exchange for money." Chino forced out a response, saying, "Of course." But inside, his thoughts were completely different. This is not the time to bring that up. You damn woman. Hearing all this, Hanade-san's interest was suddenly piqued. He tilted his head slightly and said, "A cultivator? I've heard from my brother how incredible cultivators are. I can't believe I'm seeing one here." But in the very next moment, his expression changed completely. Pulling out his gun, his face twisted into something far more dangerous as he said, "That means even if you get shot, you won't die, right?" The hooded man's composure instantly shattered. Overwhelmed with fear, he dropped to his knees, trembling and backing away as he cried out, "No way. I'm not a cultivator. This woman tricked me. Don't believe a word she says." Raisin stared at him in disbelief, her voice shaking as she said, "Then what? You said you'd find a cultivator to cure my grandfather. You told me you were a cultivator's descendant." "Shut up," he shouted desperately. Obviously, it was all lies. "Bro, that girl's loaded. If we grab her, we'll make a fortune." Hearing this, Rei-san's eyes filled with tears as she said, You tricked me." Sitting beside her, the old woman glared at him and said with disgust, "You're the worst." Watching this entire scene unfold, Hanade-san let out a bored sigh and said, "Boring. Just like I thought cultivators are all liars. Still, looks like there is someone interesting here." His gaze slowly shifted, locking on to Yimo. "At first, I didn't even notice you. I figured you were just another nobody." Then, raising his gun and pointing it directly at him, he smiled in a cruel, sinister way and said, "Go on. Get on your knees and beg for your life." But that was never going to happen. In the very next instant, Hanade pulled the trigger. The sound of the gunshot echoed sharply, but before the bullet could reach Yimo, Fuyuchen suddenly stepped in front of him. The bullet struck her instead,